Others were busy collecting Tamara Carter's body, wrapping it in white cloth, and placing it in Emily Carter's coffin, saying that only by being buried in the same coffin with her mother could the filial daughter continue to fulfill her filial duty in the underworld. In this play, some sang and some praised. The singers used all 18 martial arts, and the praisers spared no words. It was truly lively and entertaining. And the three people standing silently outside the stage all broke into mocking smiles. So this is how the play unfolds. Today has truly broadened my horizons regarding the general's capabilities. The Empress Dowager sneered, turning to Tamara Carter, "Miss Carter, you should also join the fun. With me backing you, fear nothing." Tamara Carter's eyes darkened, and she slowly nodded, "As your Majesty commands." She veiled her face, strode forward, and called out in a loud voice, "General, are you certain that the person who just touched the coffin and died was truly your daughter, Tamara Carter?" Her voice successfully attracted everyone's attention. Edward Carter's mind buzzed, a sudden sense of foreboding washing over him. But everything had proceeded smoothly. Tamara Carter's body had been carried in by Fat Fishhead himself. Of course, he hadn't personally examined it, he was afraid to see that face, eyes unclosed in death. He replied sorrowfully, "What do you mean, young lady? My daughter died such a tragic death, how can you speak such disrespectful words? How would this humble woman dare to be disrespectful?" Tamara Carter feigned grief. "It's just that, upon suddenly hearing the tragic news of your beloved daughter, I couldn't believe it." Edward Carter's eyes flashed. From afar, he couldn't discern anything unusual about the speaking woman, so he stiffly replied, "My daughter touched the coffin and died, everyone here witnessed it. How could it be fake? Is that so?" Tamara Carter sighed, suddenly pulling off her veil and saying mournfully, "If the person who touched the coffin and died was Tamara Carter, then who am I?" Everyone gasped upon seeing her face. Edward Carter collapsed onto the ground, trembling as he pointed at her, You. Don't worry, father, I'm not a ghost. I merely clawed my way back from the brink of death." Tamara Carter, clad in tattered, blood-stained garments, slowly approached him. "Last night, I nearly lost my life and didn't return all night. Yet, father, you were able to arrange the funeral and even stage this coffin-touching suicide. Could it be, father, that you knew beforehand, that you had already calculated my death?" Murmurs erupted from the crowd, and the commoners watching the spectacle began to stir. "What's going on? General, the people who ambushed your daughter, could it be that you orchestrated it? Is there even a need to ask?" "Certainly. How could anyone not recognize their own daughter? Abusing and murdering his own flesh and blood, this man is truly vicious. With such a person as Chancellor, how can the common people ever have peace? Indeed. This scheme is far too sinister and cruel. Imagine, amidst all this white, who could see clearly? All those years studying sacred texts, and it turns out it was all for the sake of committing evil." These murmurs arose continuously, each word like a needle, piercing Edward Carter and causing him to break out in a cold sweat. However, having navigated the officialdom for many years, he was no ordinary person. He quickly reacted, rushing forward to embrace Tamara Carter, feigning both surprise and joy. "Tamara, is it really you? My Tamara isn't dead, that's wonderful. What are you all standing there for? Quickly see who the dead person was." The servants hurriedly carried the body back out and unwrapped the layers of white cloth. Victoria Lennox suddenly screamed. Lying within the white cloth was a portly, middle-aged man, hacked to pieces, looking much like fresh pork on a butcher's block, his head cleanly severed. He is the butler, Robert Collins. Robert Collins is Victoria Lennox's most loyal dog, full of cunning schemes, and has offered advice to Victoria Lennox on numerous occasions. Although Tamara Carter cut off one of his ears, his loyalty remained unwavering. He personally went up Black Tiger Mountain to negotiate with Fatty Fish for this assassination attempt. Tamara Carter looked at the mangled flesh with disgust and mocked, "This man doesn't look anything like me. How could father mistake him for me? Did father truly want me dead? There must be a misunderstanding." Edward Carter, his hands drenched in sweat, clutched Tamara Carter's clothes tightly, his eyes gleaming as he stammered, Tamara, you're not dead, that's wonderful. Don't worry, I will investigate this matter thoroughly. I will find the mastermind behind this scheme, who clearly intends to drive a wedge between us. Ah, your hand is injured, and your leg too. Someone, come quickly and take Tamara for treatment. He rambled on, then suddenly yelled. Obedient guards moved to escort Tamara Carter away. Tamara Carter sneered, and from behind her, an aged yet authoritative voice rang out, "It's been a while. Minister Shen's work is becoming increasingly impressive." Edward Carter turned at the sound, and upon seeing the white-haired Empress Dowager, his knees buckled, and he trembled as he knelt, Your Majesty." The Empress Dowager snorted softly and asked coldly, "Explain. What is the meaning of this? Where is the woman who stabbed the coffin and died? Why has she suddenly turned into this dead, fat man?" Edward Carter's mind raced. Indeed, he was a cunning old fox, seasoned in the ways of officialdom. Even facing the Empress Dowager's sharp gaze, he still possessed the ability to continue his performance. "Your Majesty, I also don't know what strange thing has happened." He began to wipe away tears. "Since Emily's passing, my soul has been in turmoil, constantly in a delirious state, almost forgetting who I am. My capable subordinates have been handling everything. I truly didn't know such a bizarre incident would occur, and I certainly didn't know that my Tamara would be targeted. So who was that woman who wept so tragically before me just now?" Chapter 21. He looked around, his face a mixture of innocence and helplessness. His performance was so convincing that it was flawless, successfully deceiving a portion of the onlookers. Victoria Lennox also quickly regained her composure after the initial shock. She knelt before the Empress Dowager and said mournfully, "Your Majesty, forgive me. Not only did my husband's family, but even I myself, fail to realize that woman was an impostor. Her mourning clothes concealed her completely. How could we have known? Couldn't recognize her?" The Empress Dowager scoffed. "Are your eyes worse than this old woman's? Fine, let's assume you didn't recognize her. Then where did this dead man come from? Who was the woman who stabbed the coffin and died just now? Surely you can investigate this matter." "This matter?" Edward Carter stammered, trying to find an excuse to evade the question. The Empress Dowager snorted coldly, "What? You can't even investigate this? Then I truly question how you conduct your official duties as a minister." "We can investigate it. Of course, we can investigate it." Victoria Lennox forced a smile. "Your Majesty, please give us some time, and we will certainly uncover some clues." "Yes, that's the way to speak. I hear Lord Shen works swiftly and decisively, so interrogate her immediately. I'll wait here." Edward Carter swallowed, softly replying, "Yes, Your Majesty." He scrambled up, returning to the funeral procession, Victoria Lennox close behind, fuming, "What is the meaning of this? How is it this girl not only isn't dead, but has also found a powerful protector? The Empress Dowager is usually indifferent and unfeeling, why would she step in to defend her? How would I know?" Edward Carter's hands trembled. "I don't have the energy to investigate the details now. Finding a scapegoat is the priority." His gaze swept over the men who had carried the body, their faces paling as they huddled together, shrinking back. But what good was cowering? They were Edward Carter's hounds, whoever he pointed at would bear the consequences. Edward Carter silently calculated, finally making his choice. He selected the most unfortunate and easily controlled individual. After a perfunctory interrogation, the man tremblingly confessed, taking all the blame upon himself. He dared not refuse. From the day they followed Edward Carter, they placed their lives in his hands. One death to protect their families, or death for all, a simple calculation led to the obvious choice. Thus, the scene at the Buddha Hall of Carter Estate replayed itself, a desperate scapegoat, a bizarre reason, the fake corpse exhumed from its coffin. Seeing the face, Tamara Carter's lips curled into a cold smile. It was Meghan Trainor, Sophia Carter's most trusted confidant. Lilia Spring and Daisy Lane, once Sophia Carter's most loyal and vicious dogs, accustomed to wielding power and bullying others, likely never imagined that even their utmost loyalty couldn't buy their mistress's compassion. When silencing became necessary, she never showed mercy. Edward Carter, feigning grief and rage, beheaded the man. Black blood spurted, splattering the faces of the remaining hounds. That strange warmth sent a chill through them. The Empress Dowager adjusted her robes and rose. Very well, consider this matter settled. Attend to the funeral arrangements. This girl, Tamara, seems suitable. Raise her well, do not mistreat her. Edward Carter and Victoria Lennox, as if granted a great pardon, kowtowed profusely. We obey your Majesty's command. Little Gore, let us return. The Empress Dowager extended her hand, and Lin Gore smiled, supporting her. Tamara Carter softly said, Thank you, Your Majesty. May your journey be peaceful. The Empress Dowager turned, her cloudy eyes filled with a melancholic and complex emotion that Tamara Carter met with her own desolate gaze. The Empress Dowager sighed softly. The road ahead is long, you must take care of yourself. Tamara Carter lowered her eyes. I am grateful for your instruction. The Empress Dowager walked forward with a steady, unhurried gait. Despite her age, dressed simply in coarse cloth, she exuded the authority of her position. Tamara Carter stared, transfixed, at her receding figure. This Empress Dowager of Longwell had once been the eldest daughter of a prestigious marquis household. Sadly, both she and her mother were born with plain features and were unloved by her father, enduring a difficult life. After her father elevated his concubine to the position of principal wife, her mother died of illness, leaving her utterly desolate. Her circumstances and Tamara Carter's were indeed strikingly similar. It must be said that Lucas Sterling employed this tactic skillfully, using the Empress Dowager's grief to extricate himself. He grasped human nature precisely. Watching the Empress Dowager's receding figure, Tamara Carter withdrew her gaze, snatched the shovel from the servant's hand, and silently filled Emily Carter's grave. Edward Carter glanced at Victoria Lennox, who immediately understood, reaching out and calling, Everyone, come here, Tamara is still injured. We absolutely cannot let her overexert herself. Everyone exchanged glances. This excessively familiar call of Tamara caused some surprise within Carter Estate. Tamara Carter, however, paid no attention to Victoria Lennox's supposed kindness. She only knew that after this incident, her path ahead would be even more arduous. On Snow Jade Mountain, Lucas Sterling reclined on a large rock, drinking wine. The spring breeze brushed his face, warm and fragrant. He narrowed his eyes in enjoyment, lying there for a while until he heard light footsteps approaching. Only then did he lazily open his eyes, chuckling softly, Little Stiffy, you acted quite well today. Tamara Carter glanced at him indifferently and asked, Is Lin Gore one of yours? What's wrong? Lucas Sterling asked in return. Nothing, Tamara Carter said calmly. She's not bad, just a bit hot-headed. I'm afraid the Empress Dowager will notice the flaws once she calms down. You should think of a way to cover for her. Quite thoughtful. Lucas Sterling's face showed approval. Truly trainable material. I am already material, no need for your training. Tamara Carter retorted coldly, her eyes sweeping over him. Suddenly, she said, Why are you wearing Prince Donovan's clothes? Without wearing his clothes, how could he take the blame for me? Lucas Sterling grinned slyly. These days, I've always been showing my face for you. What if someone catches my little tail? But, he's your younger brother. Tamara Carter choked out. So what? Lucas Sterling said indifferently. He's idle to death, spending 10 years cultivating a withered flower. What's the harm in occasionally taking the blame for me? But you know he has a chronic illness. What if Edward Carter attacks him? He's not like you, raising so many dogs. Tamara Carter said indignantly. Oh dear, are you heartbroken? Lucas Sterling's expression was cunning. If you truly care for my fourth brother, then obediently listen to me. I guarantee you, as long as you obey me, nothing will happen to him. Tamara Carter was exasperated. Seriously? You're threatening me with your brother's safety? Is your mind broken? My mind is always clearer than yours. Lucas Sterling chuckled, moving closer to her. Look, you care about my fourth brother even more than I do. With him there, I'm no longer afraid of you betraying me. By the way, do you know why Edward Carter and Victoria Lennox suddenly became so obedient? Tamara Carter snorted disdainfully. Didn't you just see clearly when you came down from the mountain? Chapter 22, what you see is always just the surface. Lucas Sterling adopted a didactic tone. These two old geezers' attitudes changed so drastically not only because of the Empress Dowager, but also because I created an illusion for them. What illusion? Tamara Carter didn't understand. The illusion that you and His Highness Donovan have a very good personal relationship. Lucas Sterling said with a cunning expression. They believe that the person manipulating you behind the scenes is Prince Donovan, and Prince Donovan is a big fish, while you are the most delicious bait to catch him. Before the fish bites the hook, this bait will be very safe. Of course, you are also the bait I used to lure those two old men. You have a very important role, so you must take care of yourself. Tamara Carter gaped at his words. Good heavens, what is the structure of this man's brain? How can his thoughts be so convoluted? She suddenly had a strong urge to find an axe, split his head open, and see if he had grown extra tendons and blood vessels. Faced with such an eccentric individual, she was very afraid that she would suddenly die of a cerebral hemorrhage. The blue veins on her forehead throbbed again. She raised her hand to gently rub them, turned around, and left, returning to her estate. Unexpectedly, along the way, she attracted countless strange looks. The citizens of the capital seemed to have poured out onto the streets, crowding the road she had to take back to the Carter estate, Long and Avenue. So many people, neatly lined up on both sides of the road, their gazes fervent and curious, gave Tamara Carter a strange feeling. They seemed to be welcoming her, congratulating her triumphant return. She didn't know that Edward Carter had enjoyed this same treatment not long ago. However, it would be more appropriate to use the word encountered to describe Edward Carter's treatment. The citizens not only looked at him with scrutinizing eyes but also threw quite a few rotten vegetables, rotten eggs, along with curses. Edward Carter huddled in his carriage, not daring to show his face. Although he was the nation's highest-ranking general, with immense power and surrounded by countless experts, the law couldn't punish a crowd. He couldn't possibly drag all these gossiping commoners out and execute them. He wanted to make an example of someone, but the monkeys scattered like lightning. It was clear that someone had instigated them to deliberately make things difficult for him. But Tamara Carter was different. Her treatment was exceptionally high. As soon as she stepped onto Long and Street, thunderous applause erupted beside her. In the crowd, some enthusiastically called out, "Shane Carter," others shouted, "Quentin Carter." The atmosphere was lively, the crowd enthusiastic, no different from fans meeting a celebrity. Tamara Carter was stunned. But she was naturally indifferent. After a brief moment of astonishment, she regained her composure, riding on her steed with a straight back, eyes like autumn water, and a face as cold as frost, exuding a chilling aura. In a tea-house by the roadside, a luxuriously dressed man with a delicate appearance stood by the window, holding a teacup, leisurely observing this scene. The faint fragrance of tea filled the air. He took a small sip, his thin eyebrows raised slightly, and commented, "Pure, melancholic, bitter as life, light as a fleeting breeze, good tea." The man in blue sitting opposite him chuckled, "Are you savoring the tea, or the person? The person is like the tea is like the person, both are indescribably wondrous." The delicate man shook his head gently. "So, do you want to brew this cup of flower tea?" The man in blue couldn't help but smile. "No, I want to study it." A gentle smile appeared on the delicate man's lips. "I want to know what caused this small, insignificant flower to suddenly bloom so brilliantly. And furthermore, I want to know if this cup of tea has already been brewed by someone." The azure-clad man shrugged, subconsciously glancing down through the window, just as Tamara Carter passed by. He couldn't help but sigh, truly a breathtaking beauty. To be reduced to a mere research subject by you is a terrible waste. Tamara Carter, seemingly unaware, continued walking forward. Having finally navigated the enthusiastic crowd, she breathed a sigh of relief, dismounted her horse, and was about to push open the door when it suddenly swung wide, revealing dozens of servants and housekeepers lined up to greet her. "Welcome home, eldest miss." Mabel Price couldn't contain herself any longer and burst into laughter. "Sister, you are truly blessed. Even the imperial concubine's outings pale in comparison." She winked at Tamara Carter. "Then come and share my blessings." Tamara Carter shrugged and walked straight towards the dilapidated courtyard. Rounding the small flower garden, she saw Margaret Carter standing before her with a smile. "Tamara," she called gently, "I've heard about what happened today. My heart was in turmoil. It truly is a case of not knowing what you have until it's gone. I'm overjoyed to see you return safe and sound. Covered in blood like this, I'm certainly vibrant enough." Tamara Carter's teeth began to itch. A person needs face, a tree needs bark. Were these people not even human? Oh dear, these wounds are truly severe. Margaret Carter feigned distress. "Fortunately, I knew you were injured and had the physician prepare medicine and a floral bath. Thank you for your concern, grandmother." Tamara Carter truly didn't want to speak with this old woman any longer. She turned to leave, but Margaret Carter reached out and stopped her. "Do you still intend to return to that dilapidated courtyard?" Margaret Carter took her hand and said affectionately, "How can you possibly stay there? I've had the best yen cloud pavilion in the estate prepared for you. It's newly built, beautiful, and comfortable. All the furnishings are brand new, and I've even selected some clever maidservants for you. I'll take you there now." She led the way, and after a moment's hesitation, Tamara Carter followed. Margaret Carter wasn't wrong. The Yen Cloud Pavilion was indeed the finest courtyard in the Carter estate, lavishly decorated and opulent. It was originally intended for Victoria Lennox's 32nd birthday, but now it was generously offered to her. Tamara Carter wondered what the motive was. But since it was offered, Tamara Carter accepted it grandly. However, she didn't want the servants. With a wave of her sleeve, she instructed Mabel Price, "I don't need so many attendants. Send them back where they came from." As Mabel Price rolled up her sleeves to dismiss the servants, Margaret Carter exclaimed, "Tamara, you are the eldest miss. How can you have only one servant? If the Empress Dowager finds out, our Carter estate will be in a difficult position. However you've explained things before, explain them the same way now." Tamara Carter had seen enough of this old woman's hypocrisy. Since she was an elder, Tamara couldn't hit or scold her, so she clutched her head and feigned fainting. "Grandmother, I suddenly feel weak. Can we discuss this tomorrow?" Margaret Carter had no choice but to leave with the disgruntled servants. Tamara Carter strolled around her new residence, sniffing here and there. Mabel Price blinked and asked, "Sister, are you worried they've tampered with the furnishings?" Tamara Carter shook her head, no, this is just a habit of mine. As a special forces soldier, in an unfamiliar place, like a hostile hedgehog, I unconsciously raise all my quills, meticulously observing to avoid danger. She carefully inspected the items arranged in the room, finding nothing unusual, then glanced at the bathtub. A layer of rose petals floated in the bathtub, their rich fragrance mingling with the smoke curling from the incense burner, creating an intoxicating and relaxing atmosphere that induced drowsiness. Tamara Carter frowned, scooped up some bathwater, and extinguished the incense in the burner. Do you suspect the smoke is poisonous? Mabel Price blinked her large eyes. Chapter 23, Not suspect, but certain. Tamara Carter sniffed, thoughtfully saying, I detected an unusual scent. That's right, the water in this bathtub is also somewhat unusual. Mabel Price was astonished. There's a problem with the bathwater. That's a bit much, isn't it? Does this mean we'll always have to be cautious and constantly on guard? Precisely. Tamara Carter looked at her. If you regret this, you can still leave now. Regret? Mabel Price grinned. Can I just say, I suddenly feel very excited. Carter, I haven't experienced such a thrill in a long time. Don't worry, from today onwards, I will be observant and alert, like a knight-errant, always protecting you. Tamara Carter chuckled. All right, knight-errant, now, will you please draw me a bath? As you command. Mabel Price dashed off, quickly preparing a bath for her. Only then did Tamara Carter step in with peace of mind. The warm water soothed her wounds, causing a slight sting, but her limbs relaxed in comfort. She sighed softly and slowly closed her eyes. Mabel Price lay by the door, keeping watch, but when Tamara Carter got out of the bath, she found her snoring, asleep on the table. She shook her head, with such vigilance. What kind of knight-errant was she? She donned a robe, stepped out of the bath, opened the window, and stood, enjoying the breeze. Carter Estate was now illuminated, rows of crimson lanterns adorning the densely packed pavilions and towers, creating a mesmerizing spring night scene. Tamara Carter stealthily changed into her all-black night attire, complete with a hood and black veil. Ready, she bent low, like a fish, silently slipping into the dark night. She went to the servants' quarters where the maid Ivy Winter resided. Ivy Winter, like the deceased Daisy Lane and Megan Trainor, was a high-ranking maid serving Sophia Carter. However, while the other two served within the inner courtyard, she managed the kitchen and outside chores. As Tamara Carter anticipated, Ivy Winter was like a frightened bird, pacing back and forth in her small room. Beside her sat a sharp-chinned maid, Henry Brooks, Ivy Winter's roommate, who was currently lamenting, Ivy Winter, please stop pacing. How am I supposed to sleep with you walking back and forth like that? Sleep? How can you sleep? Ivy Winter stamped her foot. Daisy Lane and Megan Trainor are both dead, both dead. Do you know that? Henry Brooks covered her face and cried, I know, it's because I'm scared that I want to sleep. If I sleep, I don't have to think about anything. You, Ivy Winter shook her head in despair, her voice hoarse. Aren't you afraid they'll slit your throat while you're sleeping? Would they do that? Henry Brooks trembled with fear. But we don't know anything. I'm afraid they don't think so. That's what's most unjust, dying without knowing why. Ivy Winter's face was filled with despair. Suddenly, she lowered her voice. I remember when Daniel Wright came, you seemed to be in the inner courtyard. Did you notice anything strange? Him coming so early was strange in itself. Henry Brooks muttered. It was still early dawn. What letter could he have been delivering? I saw his face wasn't right, he was clearly here to cause trouble. Cause trouble? Ivy Winter murmured, repeating the words. Surprise, but not confusion, registered on her face. Tamara Carter's heart stirred. It seemed some of this maid's suspicions were confirmed. Tamara Carter quietly slipped in, quickly covered Ivy Winter's mouth, and dragged her out of the room. She only released her grip when they reached a deserted area. You, who are you? What do you want? Ivy Winter's teeth chattered in fear. I want to know your suspicions. Tamara Carter's eyes were icy. Tell me, who was hiding in Sophia Carter's room and killed Daniel Wright? I don't know. Ivy Winter vehemently shook her head. Tamara Carter silently watched her. Ivy Winter trembled, shrinking under her gaze. The eyes of the woman before her were like a cold sword, inching closer to her throat. That indescribable threat and coldness were even more terrifying and unpredictable than Edward Carter and Victoria Lennox, whom she usually feared. She whimpered and chose to submit. I'm not sure who it was, but the night before Daniel Wright died, I went out to relieve myself and happened to see a man's silhouette walking towards Second Mrs. room. That person, that figure, looked like, she softly uttered 2 words, and Tamara Carter was suddenly startled. But, I'm not sure, really not sure. Ivy Winter hurriedly waved her hands. I only glanced at him then, knowing I might have seen something private of the master's. I didn't dare to linger. But he's a frequent visitor to Carter Estate. You maids should be able to identify him just by a glimpse of his back, shouldn't you? Ivy Winter stammered, that's about right. You can leave now. Tamara Carter released her. If you want to live, keep your mouth shut. Ivy Winter covered her face and quickly slipped away, vanishing in the blink of an eye. Tamara Carter went straight back to her bedroom. She slept soundly this time, and when she woke up, the sky was bright. Mabel Price had woken up early. Seeing Tamara awake, she happily presented a pile of food, giggling and saying, "Eat without worry. I made these myself in the kitchen. They're absolutely non-toxic, harmless, and highly nutritious." Tamara Carter sat down, tasted a morsel, finding it quite palatable, and nodded. Having someone around is truly beneficial. But of course. Mabel Price puffed out her chest. I told you, sister, I excel at everything from laundry and cooking to chatting, boasting, and even fighting on behalf of others. Trust in Mabel Price, and you'll be carefree. Tamara Carter smiled. Sister, what shall we do today? Mabel Price tilted her head, asking, do you want to go find someone to fight? No need. Tamara Carter shook her head. Don't you see the peace and harmony within Carter Estate? How can we be troublemakers? We must also maintain harmony. But isn't that terribly boring? Mabel Price pouted. How can it be? Tamara Carter glanced out the window. Look, someone has come to sing for us. Mabel Price tilted her head and saw Victoria Lennox and Sophia Carter gracefully approaching. Before even entering, Victoria Lennox's face bloomed with a bright smile, her words sweeter than honey. Tamara, are you eating? She placed the food box in her hand on the table. You're injured, so I asked the kitchen to prepare a nourishing soup for you. Sophia, quickly serve your sister. Sophia Carter obediently replied, yes, and promptly arranged the soup and food for Tamara Carter, saying solicitously, elder sister, eat more so you can recover quickly. Thank you, Tamara Carter said indifferently, but I dare not drink it. Why? Sophia Carter asked innocently. I'm afraid you'll poison me. Tamara Carter had no intention of playing the part of a loving mother and sister with them. Victoria Lennox and Sophia Carter's expressions changed simultaneously. Tamara Carter watched them coldly. Chapter 24, Ahem. Victoria Lennox coughed twice, dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, and said in a choked voice, it's understandable that you would say that. I, your aunt, have truly wronged you in the past. Tamara Carter's face remained impassive, her eyes like ancient wells, undisturbed. Victoria Lennox continued, I was jealous, afraid your mother would steal your father away, which led me to do those things. Now that your mother has passed, I, as your elder, how can I be so shameless as to continue to entangle with a junior like you? I came today to apologize to you. After speaking, she pulled Sophia Carter's hand, and the two knelt before Tamara Carter, kowtowing repeatedly. While doing so, they sobbed, "Please, eldest miss, for your father's sake, forgive our past transgressions." Tamara Carter found it all quite amusing. Victoria Lennox, with her haughty nature, who could make her lower herself to such a degrading act? She didn't think she possessed such power. Therefore, this early morning drama was certainly not intended for her eyes alone, was it? She tilted her head, observing the mother and daughter. They were truly skilled. The Yen Cloud Pavilion's floor was so soft, yet they managed to kowtow until their foreheads were bloody. Indeed, experts trained in the inner courts of a royal residence had a distinct approach. Rushing to her room at dawn to create a scene like this, even in modern times, would be difficult to explain, let alone in ancient times, especially considering their positions of power. Hearing footsteps outside, Tamara Carter reacted instantly, staggering dramatically and collapsing onto the carpet. Her fall was exaggerated. She touched Victoria Lennox's bloodied forehead, smeared some on her own face, and lay still. The door burst open, and a group entered aggressively, led by a beautiful woman of similar age to Victoria Lennox, sharing some facial features, but more striking and regal. Behind the noble woman, the Empress Dowager stood with silver hair and an impassive expression. Beside her was a young man in fine robes, handsome but with thick lips and dull eyes, appearing somewhat simple. Seeing the trio, the Sterlings wailed louder, "Please, eldest miss, spare us and Sophia. We've been kneeling since before dawn, for hours. Surely your anger has subsided." Mabel Price, stunned, interjected, "How dare you lie? Who made you kneel? You chose to. And ours? Your mind is addled, you can't even tell time." A sharp slap echoed. Mabel Price, clutching her cheek, glared at the noblewoman. "Who are you? How dare you slap me? She is His Majesty's favored concubine, noble consort she. She slapped you for your disrespect." Addressing her without kneeling, the young man declared haughtily. "If you're unsatisfied, she can grant you 3 feet of white silk." "Noble consort she?" Mabel Price gasped. "Mabel Price, kneel." Tamara Carter said calmly. "Your Highness, this girl is from the countryside, she doesn't know of the esteemed consort. Ignorance is no excuse, but— And do you know who I am?" Consort she approached, looking down at her. "Why did you make my aunt and cousin kneel at dawn? What did they do?" "I don't understand what you're saying," Tamara Carter replied evenly. "When did you see me force 5th concubine and my sister to kneel? The truth is clear. You still deny it?" Consort she gestured to the Sterlings. "The Carter estate's heiress, so petty and lacking generosity. How can you manage the household? There's another truth before you, do you not see it?" Tamara Carter retorted, expressionless. "I lie here, bleeding, and you don't ask why. You jump to conclusions without knowing the facts. I object. I know they are your relatives, but the law dictates even officials recuse themselves in such cases. You should too." Consort she, taken aback by Tamara Carter's boldness, was speechless. Crown Prince Liam Sterling sneered, sharp tongue. "If the consort recuses herself, I'm no relation. I needn't, do I? The Crown Prince is the adopted son of noble consort High, the maternal cousin of 2nd Madam, and 3rd sister. How can you say there's no connection?" Tamara Carter retorted fearlessly. "So, you mean to say that you can mistreat 2nd Madam and 3rd sister here, and no one can control you?" Liam Sterling suddenly stepped forward, his shoe pressing down on Tamara Carter's sleeve, sneering, "You, this vicious and malicious woman, have such a sharp tongue. Your Highness is mistaken. It's not that I have a sharp tongue, but that I'm speaking the truth." Tamara Carter looked him straight in the eye, unafraid. "His Highness accuses me of mistreating them, but where is the evidence? What more evidence is needed?" Liam Sterling pointed at the blood on the foreheads of Madame Sterling and her daughter. Their heads are bleeding from kowtowing. If you hadn't pressured them excessively, why would they be like this? Bleeding from kowtowing? Tamara Carter scoffed. That's truly strange. On such a thick carpet, how could they kowtow until they bleed? Why doesn't your highness have someone try it? You clearly kicked my mother's and my foreheads with your foot. Sophia Carter cried. Everyone knows you're highly skilled in martial arts. My mother and I are so weak, how could we withstand your kick? Oh, so I kicked you. Tamara Carter sneered. Then, please invite the Empress Dowager to adjudicate. Invite a physician to examine the injuries. If there are indeed kick marks on your foreheads, I'll submit to any punishment. Victoria Lennox and Sophia Carter exchanged glances, cold sweat dripping from their foreheads. What was happening? They clearly intended to frame her, but somehow, they had dug their own graves. How could noble consort Hai not notice their guilty expressions? She wanted to help her sister, not watch them lose face. She immediately coughed softly, rubbed her forehead, and sighed. You people are so troublesome. All right, as they say, it's difficult for an upright official to settle family affairs. I'm too tired to deal with you. Empress Dowager, the Emperor is waiting for us, let's return. Indeed, Grand Empress Mother, these inner courtyard squabbles are so upsetting. Crown Prince Liam Sterling echoed. It's more important to accompany father to the sacred temple for incense offering. The Empress Dowager chuckled. Look at you, mother and son. You instigated this, haven't even warmed your seats, and now you're urging me to leave. Do you think I'm that nimble? This girl has a sharp tongue. If you find her annoying, present the facts to silence her, so she can't complain anymore. She then called the imperial physician following behind. Go and examine them. I'll set a standard here first. Among these three, whoever is most seriously injured is the most justified. Chapter 25. The imperial physician obeyed and stepped forward. Victoria Lennox and Sophia Carter paled, seeing their impending humiliation. Suddenly, Liam Sterling cried out, seemingly tripping over something and falling to the ground. As soon as he hit the ground, he wailed. Noble consort Hai rushed forward. Hatch, what's wrong? Did you break a bone? Is it serious? Mother, my leg hurts terribly, it might be dislocated. Liam Sterling clutched his leg, glaring fiercely at Tamara Carter. This damned girl, so vicious. Just because I said a few words to you, you wanted to play tricks on me. Tamara Carter was speechless, stunned into silence. Damn. Such a blatant and direct false accusation, she had truly never encountered anything like it before. Having just jumped out of one pit, she fell into another. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. This person before her held too high a rank, and the framing scheme was too despicable and abrupt to counter. Liam Sterling's actions inadvertently relieved the pressure on Victoria Lennox and Sophia Carter. These two, like devoted servants to their own parents, fussed over him constantly. Now that His Royal Highness the Crown Prince was injured, what could be more important? After a period of chaos, the medical examination was quickly abandoned, but the matter of Tamara Carter injuring the Crown Prince was not so easily resolved. Liam Sterling stood up haltingly, grimacing as he said, You injured this Crown Prince, but considering you are the legitimate daughter of Carter estate, this Crown Prince will not quibble with you. However, while a death sentence can be pardoned, a living punishment cannot be avoided. Grandmother, 20 strokes for her, is that not excessive? The Empress Dowager frowned slightly, silently observing Tamara Carter. Tamara Carter remained silent, but Mabel Price cried out in alarm from the other side, 20 strokes. Isn't that enough to break my sister's waist? Your Royal Highness, even if you want to defend those two, you don't need to be so cruel. Mabel Price. Tamara Carter snapped softly. How can you speak to His Royal Highness like that? I startled the crown prince and deserve to be punished. Just as second aunt and third sister schemed to falsely accuse me, I must also punish them accordingly. The nation has its laws, and the family has its rules. The crown prince has given me 20 strokes, so I will give each of them 40. Mabel Price, quickly prepare the rods. I, second aunt and third sister will all receive our punishment. You dare. Liam Sterling instantly flew into a rage. Where is the evidence of their scheming? You have no proof. The imperial physician was conducting the examination. Wasn't it interrupted by the crown prince's injury? Tamara Carter sneered. It's not too late to find evidence now, is it? If they didn't scheme, I'll take all 60 strokes myself. How about that? You. Liam Sterling was so furious his eyes nearly bulged out. Consort she stared intently at Tamara Carter, her gaze dark, while the Empress Dowager's lips curved into a slight smile. This girl, what audacity! Proceed with the examination. Tamara Carter urged. I accept the Crown Prince's punishment, but I also ask the Crown Prince not to interfere with my lawful enforcement of family rules. You are the heir apparent, how can you allow officials to set fires but forbid the common people to light lamps? Liam Sterling was cornered. If he wanted to punish Tamara Carter, then the Sterling mother and daughter wouldn't escape punishment either. He gnashed his teeth, wishing he could immediately pick Tamara Carter up and throw her out the window. Consort she blinked, massaged her temples, and said irritably, Enough. My head aches from your bickering this early in the morning. We came to accompany His Majesty to the sacred temple for incense offerings, not to mediate your family affairs. This matter ends here. No more disturbances. Liam Sterling glared fiercely at Tamara Carter, flung his sleeve, and stormed off. The Empress Dowager pursed her lips and turned to leave as well. Tamara Carter called out in a deep voice, Farewell, Empress Dowager, consort she, and your Royal Highness the Crown Prince. Noble consort she cast a cold glance at her. Tamara Carter, meeting her gaze directly without flinching, possessed clear, chilling eyes. Noble consort she suddenly smiled, saying, Your eyes are beautiful, like 2 crystal balls. I like them very much. Though she spoke of liking, her eyes seemed to want to reach out like hooks, plucking Tamara Carter's eyes out to play with as crystal balls. This sinister malice, combined with her slightly parted red lips, was unspeakably eerie and terrifying. But Tamara Carter, unafraid even of gruesome corpses, how could she fear this distorted face? She curved her lips into a sweet, innocent smile, replying, Thank you for your praise, noble consort she. Noble consort she snorted coldly and left gracefully. These people arrived strangely and left quickly, soon disappearing without a trace. Tamara Carter smiled, turning to tease Victoria Lennox, second concubine, Would you like to see them off? Victoria Lennox gave a wry smile. How dare I presume to see them off? Let's go back. You should rest well. Tamara Carter nodded. I will definitely rest well. Once my health recovers, whether it's killing or dissecting, I'll be even more efficient. These words, spoken with bone-chilling coldness, made Sophia Carter involuntarily shudder. Victoria Lennox pulled her away. Mabel Price breathed a sigh of relief, patting her chest and saying, Oh my, that. Mother and daughter are truly sinister. I'd heard from my mother that the battles in the inner palace were terrifying, but I never imagined that the infighting within a household could be just as bad. Your mother was in the palace? Tamara Carter asked curiously. My mother was a palace maid. Mabel Price nodded. She served a noble consort and was later released to marry. My father was also in the palace. I heard from my mother that he was a 4th-rank imperial guard with a saber, serving the previous emperor. Is that so? How did he die? Tamara Carter inquired further. An imperial guard, of course, he died protecting the emperor. Mabel Price shrugged. But I never met him. After he died, the court gave my mother a large sum of money, but it was because of this money that my mother was robbed by bandits and also died. I feel like my father was a jinx, Sister Carter. Don't you think so? Tamara Carter remained silent. It was a tragic story, but Mabel Price was clearly heartened, recounting these events without a trace of sorrow in her eyes. Tamara patted her shoulder, replying, "Indeed. In the future, if you marry, just marry a merchant. That way, you won't end up tragically like your mother." "I think so too." Mabel Price giggled. "What about you, Sister Carter? If you were to marry, what kind of person would you want to marry?" "Me?" Tamara Carter chuckled. "I'm not interested in marriage. I'm only interested in corpses. Not even interested in His Highness Donovan." Mabel Price suddenly brought a pot of orchids in front of her. "Don't you think His Highness Donovan is very much like this orchid? What do the scholars say?" "Ah, yes, unworldly orchid. Oh dear, you mentioning this orchid reminds me." Tamara Carter hurriedly took the pot, carefully placing it in the backyard. She grabbed a shovel, dug a hole, carefully transplanted the orchid, meticulously filled in the soil, and then drew water to water it. While she was busily occupied, she suddenly heard someone call from behind her, "Eldest Miss." Tamara Carter turned around. Standing beneath the radiant golden sun was a resplendent woman adorned with jewels and jade, sparkling and dazzling. "So it's fifth concubine." Tamara Carter brushed the dirt off her hands and casually inquired, "What brings fifth concubine to me?" "Nothing important, just came to see you." Fifth concubine Rome was born with a charming face, delicate eyebrows and eyes, a straight, high nose, a pointed chin, a slender waist, and curvaceous hips, an alluring figure. Chapter 26 Tamara Carter's expression remained unchanged as she looked at her. In the original host's memory, fifth concubine wasn't considered a bad person. During the days the original host spent at Carter Estate, she hadn't treated them poorly and had even warmly welcomed them. Of course, her warmth had nothing to do with kindness. She was simply acting in her own self-interest. Victoria Lennox becoming the second wife, and the first wife being replaced by the meek and gentle Emily Carter, was undoubtedly advantageous for her. However, she quickly realized that this mother and daughter were utterly spineless. Having struggled with Victoria Lennox for so many years, their relationship was like fire and water. Roan would never value such useless individuals. After her efforts yielded no response or worthwhile benefits, Roan directly ignored the mother and daughter, treating them like dirt beneath her feet, occasionally stepping on them and spitting. For the original host, who had endured all kinds of humiliation, such petty insults were insignificant. Facing such a woman, Tamara Carter wasn't overly disgusted, but she certainly couldn't say she liked her. She calmly replied, "Thank you for your concern, fifth concubine. These are just minor superficial wounds, nothing serious. Small wounds may be nothing, but I'm afraid they might leave scars." Rome affectionately took her hand and said, "Look at this skin, so fair and smooth, how beautiful. It would be a shame if it scarred. Don't forget, you're an unmarried young lady." The heavy scent of cosmetics emanating from her made Tamara Carter nauseous. She quietly withdrew her hand and said indifferently, "I don't care about such things." "My dear girl, how can you not care?" Rome hurriedly took out a small porcelain bottle from her bosom and said, "This is a scar removal ointment I had a renowned imperial physician in the palace concoct. It's very effective. Keep it and use it." With that, she stuffed the bottle into Tamara Carter's pocket. Tamara Carter, unwilling to struggle with her, let her do as she pleased. After giving her the ointment, Rome still showed no intention of leaving. Rolling up her sleeves, she even offered to help her plant flowers. Tamara Carter couldn't bear to let such precious flowers be ruined by her, so she immediately grabbed Rome's wrist and coldly said, "If fifth concubine has nothing else, please return." Rome awkwardly withdrew. Her hand, pouted her bright red lips, and sighed softly, "Eldest Miss, I know you blame me. Blame you? Tamara Carter glanced at her and asked blandly, has fifth concubine done anything wrong to me? I was also helpless. Fifth concubine's face was filled with aggrieved helplessness. You know, in this Carter estate, Sterling holds absolute power. Even the general has to heed her, let alone me, a lowly concubine. To protect my children, I've endured hardships and wrongs, inevitably doing some shameful things. I hope eldest miss will forgive me. Tamara Carter chuckled softly, whether I forgive or not, it doesn't seem to matter much, does it? You can't say that. Fifth concubine suddenly leaned close to her ear, the eldest miss is the legitimate daughter, the mistress of this house. Victoria Lennox, like us, is just a concubine, and shouldn't be above the eldest miss. You don't know, these past few days, seeing you discipline Sterling's mother, those of us who have been tormented by her are overjoyed. Is that so? Tamara Carter glanced at her, fifth concubine is only overjoyed, not thinking of lending a hand. Fifth concubine narrowed her eyes, cautiously looking around before whispering, eldest miss, you've hit the nail on the head. In the future, if you need me, just say the word. With you in charge, I won't be as submissive as before. It seems like concubine has never been submissive. Tamara Carter chuckled softly, I recall concubine always sparring quite fiercely with Sterling. Fifth concubine suddenly became elated, Tamara, I've seen your capabilities clearly. You've been hiding them before, but this time it's like an explosion. Seeing you become so strong, I'm so overjoyed. Concubine is overjoyed for herself, isn't she? Tamara Carter remarked with a hint of sarcasm. You girl. Fifth concubine covered her mouth, then frankly admitted, yes, I'm happy for myself. I'm no longer like before, suffering and enduring alone. Tamara Carter smiled, sincerely nodding at her, if fifth concubine offers her support, it's more than I could ask for. Dung narrowed her eyes, smiling like a cunning fox who had just achieved her scheme. The cunning fox swayed her hips and sleeves triumphantly as she departed, leaving behind a strong scent of musk. Mabel Price waved her hand to disperse the cloying fragrance and curiously asked Tamara Carter, will she be our ally? She will. Tamara Carter winked, but not yet. Mabel Price, do something for me. A fight? Mabel Price's face lit up with excitement. Kidnapping someone. Tamara Carter replied. Kidnapping a man. Mabel Price covered her mouth. In your dreams. Tamara Carter gave her a sideways glance, kidnap fifth concubine. Huh. Mabel Price was stunned. Tamara Carter whispered in her ear for a while, and Mabel Price giggled, I like this. Good sister, I'll go do it right away. Be careful, don't let anyone catch you red-handed. Tamara Carter warned. Just wait and see. Mabel Price stretched her neck and waist, and marched off confidently. A moment later, Mabel Price returned, giggling, reporting to eldest sister, fifth concubine's face got scratched by some wild cat. Oh dear, how unfortunate. Tamara Carter sighed, did you give her the scar removal ointment? Yes. Mabel Price chuckled inwardly, sister, what do you think will happen when she uses the ointment you gave her? I don't know, I only know that what happens to her depends on how she treats me. Tamara Carter narrowed her eyes. One shouldn't sow the wind and reap the whirlwind. But, having sown the wind, one will not only reap the whirlwind, but a particularly unsightly one. In the late afternoon, a terrifying scream echoed from fifth concubine Dung's chambers. Ah, my face, what has happened to my face? Dung stared at her reflection, unable to believe her eyes. She had merely scratched her face on a stray cat, felt a bit unsettled, and napped for an extra hour. How could she have woken up looking so dreadful? Her trembling hand touched the scratch, it had begun to swell, fester, and even turn black and rotten in places. How could this happen? Why? Completely bewildered, she screamed and swept everything off her dressing table. Fifth madam, please don't panic. I'll fetch the physician immediately. Jenny, her attendant, rushed off to summon the physician from his dinner. The physician inquired about Dung's treatment of the wound. After examining the scar ointment and sniffing it, he sighed, yes, it's the ointment. It must be adulterated with a toxin that caused the wound to fester and rot. Dung was speechless. Chapter 27 Victoria Lennox had given her the ointment, one box laced with a slow-acting poison, meant for Tamara Carter, and another, supposedly a gift for her. She was always cautious and never used anything given to her by Victoria Lennox. But this ointment was truly precious, requiring a year to gather the ingredients, and its effects were remarkable. Victoria Lennox and Sophia Carter used it regularly, and she had always coveted it. Unexpectedly, she had been both used and tricked. Dung swallowed hard and anxiously asked, "Physician, can this be treated?" "Your life is not in danger, but," the physician trailed off. Dung looked at herself in the mirror and smiled bitterly. At Yen Cloud Pavilion, Tamara Carter and Mabel Price lounged on chairs, leisurely sipping tea and eating sunflower seeds. "Sister, half of her face is gone, It looks like a black spider crawling on her face, indescribably ugly." Mabel Price swung her feet and laughed heartily. People need to experience a few unforgettable events to truly learn obedience. Tamara Carter adjusted her clothes and stood up. "I'll go see if this vixen has the qualities to be our ally." She pushed open the doors of Yen Cloud Pavilion and strolled out, along the winding corridors. She encountered numerous servants along the way, all of whom were awestruck and respectful, fearful that any breach of etiquette would offend this lethal figure. Tamara Carter ignored them and went straight to the fifth concubine's courtyard. As she reached the gate, a gleaming mirror flew towards her. She tilted her head to avoid it, and it shattered at her feet. The young maidservant inside the room was terrified and knelt down. The fifth concubine, sensing something was amiss, peeked out and saw Tamara Carter. She stammered nervously, "So it's Tamara, why aren't you resting?" "I was about to, but I heard rumors among the servants that fifth concubine's face was ruined." She entered as she spoke, glanced at the fifth concubine's face, and feigned surprise. "Oh my! Is it true?" Fifth concubine hastily covered her face, sobbing uncontrollably, while Tamara Carter sat down before her and urgently inquired, "What happened? Wasn't everything all right this morning? Isn't it all because of that sterling slut?" Fifth concubine gritted her teeth, suddenly gripping Tamara Carter's hand and anxiously asking, "The scar removal ointment I gave you, have you used it yet?" "You absolutely must not." Tamara Carter asked curiously, "Why?" "Because," fifth concubine's complexion shifted, her eyes darted around, then she tearfully explained, "That scar removal ointment was given to me by that sterling slut. I thought it was a good thing, so I casually gave you a box. Unexpectedly, she put poison in it. It's fine if my face is ruined, but if the face of an unmarried daughter like you is ruined, my crime would be enormous." Tamara Carter sneered inwardly. Fifth concubine had an old, unsightly scar on her stomach. Ever since the sterling mother and daughter were granted the palace's secret scar removal ointment by noble consort she and cured the small scar on her arm, fifth concubine had been itching to get some. However, considering Victoria Lennox's character, how could she possibly give it to her? The more secretive it was kept, the less fifth concubine was even allowed to see it. As soon as the mysterious high-grade scar removal ointment appeared, Tamara Carter had guessed a few things. She had Mabel Price secretly test it, and sure enough, she also had a jar. Tamara Carter then took the opportunity to swap them when Mabel wasn't paying attention, and fifth concubine predictably fell for the trick. What does it mean to be hoisted by your own petard? This is precisely it. Tamara Carter felt triumphant, but outwardly feigned surprise and offered comfort. "Don't worry, concubine, I haven't had a chance to use it yet. It's fortunate you reminded me, otherwise," she sighed and continued, "the sterlings are truly vicious. How could concubine dare to use something given by her? Consider this a lesson learned. With a face already ruined like this, if she hasn't learned her lesson, then she might as well die. Tamara Carter thought to herself, daring to speak so plainly about this kind of poison, this fifth concubine had some qualifications to be her ally. Fifth concubine raised her head, a resolute and ruthless look on her face. As long as I still have a breath left, I will definitely not let that slut off. Tamara, trust me, if what I say is false, may I be struck by 5 lightning bolts. Tamara Carter smiled, I naturally trust you, concubine. There's no need for such a venomous oath. Oh, right, I have some healing medicine from outside, very effective for skin recovery. I'm using it myself. Concubine, try it. It may not restore it completely, but it will certainly be much better than it is now. After saying this, she took out a red porcelain bottle from her bosom. Fifth concubine gratefully accepted it. The two chatted for a while longer, and seeing that it was getting dark, Tamara Carter excused herself and left. Although she hadn't done anything all day, she felt very tired. She lay down for a while on the long chair in the courtyard. The pure fragrance of the orchid of tranquil grace made her extremely relaxed. Looking up at the sky, the night was as dark as velvet, the stars twinkling. A gentle breeze brushed past her ears, unusually soothing. This made her mind drift a little, seemingly back to the years before she turned 12, when she would often sit on the terrace counting stars in her free time. Such simple, peaceful, and happy days had ended far too soon. Lost in thought, she suddenly felt a gust of dark wind sweep past, a mixture of powdery fragrances wafting into her nose. She frowned, covered her nose and mouth, and said irritably, Lucas Sterling, do you never bathe after cavorting with women? My! This woman, such strong words. Lucas Sterling, clad in a black robe, playfully hung himself from the peach tree before her. You are still an unmarried maiden, must you speak so bluntly? Tamara Carter curled her lip, replying, before a rogue like you, I need not feign purity. With such frank innocence, be careful not to attract unwanted attention. Lucas Sterling winked a few times, then asked, I heard from my subordinates that you had quite a successful day. What's it to you? Tamara Carter retorted. Is this the prelude to going solo? Lucas Sterling scoffed. Without the dragon butcher, I wouldn't necessarily have to eat hairy pork. Tamara Carter responded without politeness. Such vulgar language from a young lady, Lucas Sterling glanced sideways at her. Ah, right, I almost forgot, you are indeed a butcher. I'll take that as a compliment. Tamara Carter winked, a smirk playing on her lips. Thank you for the praise. Lucas Sterling laughed heartily. However, whatever you're planning, you should at least reveal a little. In case something happens to you, I can at least arrange your funeral. No need. Tamara Carter replied, each word distinct. If you don't get in my way, I should be lighting incense in gratitude. Don't say that. We are allies, after all. Lucas Sterling suddenly reached out and pulled the orchid pot closer. If you don't take care of yourself, my fourth brother will worry. Don't forget, you're not fighting alone now. Behind you is my fourth brother. Weeds must be pulled out by the roots. If you fail, it will implicate your savior. You. Tamara Carter, exasperated, spoke coarsely, I want to catch someone in the act. Catch someone in the act. Lucas Sterling giggled, covering his mouth. My dear girl, this isn't something a lady should do. Leave it to your older brother. Hashtag chapter 28, no. Tamara Carter shook her head resolutely. This, I want to do myself. You are not allowed to interfere. When? Where? How? Lucas Sterling pressed. I heard it's Fifth Highness's birthday in a few days, isn't it? Tamara Carter answered evasively. You want to make your move right at the birthday banquet? Lucas Sterling raised an eyebrow. What better time? Everyone involved will be present, no one can escape, right? Tamara Carter said calmly. Oh, I heard from Daniel Wright that Fifth Highness's backyard has a lot of jasmine flowers. Yes. Lucas Sterling nodded. Why do you ask? No reason. Tamara Carter replied. You'll know when the time comes. Lucas Sterling laughed. Having lived for over 20 years, he had truly never met a woman like this. What did she have? Alone, followed only by a constantly wailing maid, what could she possibly accomplish? Yet, looking at her expression, calm, peaceful, a look of complete composure, as if everything was under her control. He suddenly felt an intense curiosity. All right, he would stand behind the scenes and observe carefully, to see what medicine she was selling in her gourd. 5 days later was fifth Prince John Sterling's birthday. As the legitimate daughter of the Carter estate and elder sister to the fifth prince's fiancée, Tamara Carter was naturally on the guest list. Sophia Carter, needless to say, awoke before dawn to begin her elaborate makeup routine, agonizing over her attire and cosmetics, keeping her dozen maidservants in a constant flurry of activity until the sun rose high, finally emerging fully adorned. It must be said that Sophia Carter, meticulously made up, was breathtakingly beautiful, her face like a hibiscus flower, every frown and smile captivating, truly deserving of her title as Longwell Kingdom's foremost beauty. In contrast, Tamara Carter appeared remarkably casual. In honor of the prince's birthday, she eschewed her usual white male attire for a pale purple ensemble, draped with a white veil, simple in design, her hair loosely gathered atop her head, the rest cascading over her shoulders, her face devoid of makeup. Standing side by side, the two presented a stark contrast, one adorned with gold, silver, and jewels, meticulously groomed, the other relaxed and natural, her face bare. In matters of dress, some prefer extravagance, others simplicity, each to their own taste, making comparisons futile. Yet, some insist on making such comparisons. Sophia Carter's eyes flicked repeatedly towards Tamara Carter, finally. Unable to contain herself, she remarked with a pout, "Sister, your appearance is rather too casual, isn't it? People will think our Carter estate cannot even afford proper attire for its women. Implying, with your attire, you disgrace our Carter estate." Tamara Carter glanced at her, replying calmly, "Aren't you here? With you present, people will know the Carter estate is overflowing with wealth." "How can you say such a thing?" Sophia Carter retorted, twisting her waist and pouting, "I only meant well. I merely stated a fact." Tamara Carter, having no time for bickering, turned and entered the waiting carriage. The carriage rolled on, arriving at the fifth prince's residence after about half an hour. The princely residence was decorated with lanterns and flowers, guests gathered for the birthday celebration thronged the rear courtyard hall, their splendid attire and laughter creating a joyous and bustling atmosphere. The arrival of Tamara and Sophia Carter caused a considerable stir. This stir was largely due to Tamara Carter. While Sophia Carter's beauty was renowned, those familiar with the capital's elite were accustomed to it, finding it less dazzling. Conversely, Tamara Carter's simple attire and indifferent demeanor struck them as novel. This young lady, secluded for nearly a year within the Carter estate, confined to the rear courtyard, unknown to most, presumed to be as insignificant as an ant, destined to perish unnoticed, had unexpectedly risen in defiance, abruptly turning the tables, throwing the entire Carter estate into disarray. The world loves a spectacle, and now that the central figure of this drama had arrived, people couldn't help but crowd around, Tamara Carter quickly enveloped by curious gazes, women inquiring after gossip, men murmuring comparisons of the sister's beauty. A young nobleman, with a touch of poetic flair, fanning himself, remarked, "This one is like a red apricot blossom in full bloom amidst spring, while that one resembles a gentle breeze carrying snowflakes, with hazy green mountains, both are indescribably exquisite." Just as he finished, someone scoffed, "Stop your flowery nonsense. What gentle breeze and snowflakes? She looks like a butcher cutting up pigs. You better watch out, that young miss might just get you with a knife. Hearing this, everyone felt a mix of fear and curiosity, drawing closer to Tamara Carter and greeting her. The enthusiastic crowd surged forward, jostling Sophia Carter, the renowned beauty, until the powder on her face fell off, her face turning purple with anger as she resented Tamara Carter for stealing her spotlight. But she didn't know that Tamara Carter didn't care for the spotlight. In her dictionary, being observed and judged was a rather pointless affair. However, this was a banquet, a social gathering, a place where gossip and rumors flew freely, and also a place to achieve dreams or ambitions. If one wanted to live a carefree life, one first had to learn how to cope. The inherent pride in her character didn't hinder her from interacting cordially with others. After all, in her 25 years in the modern world, she hadn't lived in a vacuum. As the daughter of a high-ranking official, she had long understood the art of reading faces and being tactful. She opened her mouth, revealing 8 perfect teeth, her smile both reserved and amiable. Faced with a constant stream of people, various faces, and diverse expressions, from princes and generals to noble ladies, whether contemptuous, indifferent, curious, or scrutinizing, regardless of their inner thoughts, she responded with a gentle smile. She was naturally aloof and didn't usually enjoy smiling, but in this situation, putting on a frosty face would be self-destructive. Socializing with a smile proved effective. Under Victoria Lennox's watchful eye, those who dared to approach and greet her definitely had the potential to become her allies. Her memory was excellent. After just one conversation, she could remember people's names and characteristics, establishing a familiarity akin to longtime acquaintances. Seeing her gracefully navigate among the dignitaries, conversing with ease, Victoria Lennox and Sophia Carter were astonished. Edward Carter, who had arrived earlier, unconsciously widened his eyes. Could this beautiful, elegant woman, who attracted the admiring gazes of so many young men, truly be his timid and fragile daughter? Lucas Sterling, leaning against the cotton tree, was also slightly taken aback by this scene. Just how many more surprises could this woman possibly have in store for him? He had assumed she would maintain her usual aloof demeanor, but unexpectedly, she smiled. She truly was a social butterfly in full bloom. After a period of socializing, Tamara Carter began to intentionally withdraw. In such a crowded banquet, finding a quiet place to escape unnoticed was relatively easy. Chapter 29. Sitting on a stone bench beneath a trellis of flowers, she breathed a sigh of relief, quietly observing the bustling crowd in the main hall. At first glance, she saw 5th Prince John Sterling. She couldn't help but notice him. He was the central figure today, the most crucial character in the play she was about to direct. In all fairness, among Alexander Sterling's 5 sons, John Sterling was the most ordinary. This was because the first prince was born disabled, paralyzed in modern terms. As the emperor's firstborn son, his condition greatly disappointed Alexander Sterling, frankly disgracing the royal family. Therefore, he was confined, spared from further embarrassing his father in public. Thus, in such instances, the first prince's absence was expected and accepted. It seemed as if the first prince was born to be forgotten. Even if he weren't disabled, he wouldn't have escaped the fate of being deposed or harmed. The second prince, Crown Prince Liam Sterling, was quite average, neither missing limbs nor exhibiting any physical deformities. However, he possessed a rather simple expression, often mistaken for someone with a cognitive impairment. Of course, this was the private opinion of the populace. The court officials defined him as honest and straightforward, a wise man playing the fool. Tamara Carter hadn't detected any great wisdom in him, but he certainly wasn't lacking in schemes to harm others. At this moment, he was weaving through the crowd, flaunting his eloquence, speaking incessantly and at length, every word for the country and its people, as if afraid others wouldn't recognize him as the heir apparent. The third prince, Lucas Sterling, needed no introduction. Surrounded by admirers, he was a notorious playboy, known to have been toyed with by countless women. Yet, he wasn't ashamed, on the contrary, he seemed to consider it an honor. He was currently leaning against a cotton tree, posing with one foot slightly raised, eyes lowered, casting flirtatious glances, his chest half exposed, the epitome of a frivolous dandy. Strangely enough, this type of man had admirers. He was surrounded by a group of female guests, both young and old, giggling at his every word. The fourth prince, Lorenzo Sky, typically didn't appear at such banquets, yet Tamara Carter couldn't help but picture his face. It was peculiar how the same face, with different expressions and demeanor, could appear as two different people. Tamara Carter's thoughts lingered for a few seconds on the dense bushes that night and the serene, lotus-like face before shifting back to the main character of today, fifth Prince John Sterling. John Sterling wore a crimson robe, easily distinguishable even amidst the crowd. With sharp eyebrows and bright eyes, he exuded a dignified and imposing aura, yet remained calm and humble. All these words seemed tailor-made for him. John Sterling possessed an air of righteousness, appearing more regal than the crown prince. Tamara Carter had a favorable impression of him, perhaps influenced by the residual memories of the original owner. After all, when the original owner was falsely accused, he was the only one who spoke up for her. Such a kind and gentle man was wasted on someone like Sophia Carter. She paused briefly, then searched for the youngest prince of the Longwell Kingdom, sixth Prince James Sterling. Though considered the youngest, James Sterling was nearly 20 years old. He appeared older than his age and bore the closest resemblance to Alexander Sterling. He could be considered handsome, but his skin was somewhat pale, his eyebrows sparse and light, and his dark eyes lacked vitality. To say his eyes were soulless wasn't entirely accurate. Most of the time, the sixth prince's dark eyes seemed focused on something distant, giving them a strangely somber cast. That somberness was chilling, like lying on pale moss in a frigid valley, the damp coldness seeping into one's very core. She disliked the feeling, so she quickly looked away, patiently awaiting the birthday banquet's commencement. At midday, the banquet finally began. Half an hour later, the guests were flushed and merry, their spirits high. The distinct fragrance of jasmine permeated the air, inducing a pleasant, intoxicating euphoria. But regardless of others' inebriation, Tamara Carter remained sober, her gaze cold and fixed on two individuals at the banquet. Sophia Carter, her face flushed like a peach blossom and clearly exhausted, was escorted by Victoria Lennox to the resting chambers behind the rear courtyard. A short while later, Crown Prince Liam Sterling rose and unsteadily made his way towards the same rear courtyard. Tamara Carter exhaled softly, lowering her eyes and waiting patiently. Soon, a nimble figure darted out from the rear courtyard, Mabel Price. Unable to contain her excitement, she whispered in Tamara's ear, "Sister, the fish has taken the bait. Should we cast the net now?" "Not yet," Tamara Carter replied calmly. "Wait until they've developed a taste for it, then. Catch them in the act. It'll be a much more entertaining spectacle." She adjusted her attire and, with an impassive expression, returned to the banquet. Lucas Sterling, seated beside her and constantly observing her every move, grew restless. Why hasn't she made her move yet, he wondered. His impatience was futile. He had intended to assist her, but for some reason, he feared ruining her plan. "I'm useless," he berated himself. It's just a woman. Why am I letting her control me like this? Amidst his anxiety, Andy Wright, the fifth prince's guard, rushed over and exclaimed, "Your Highness, it's an emergency. The chief minister of the capital just reported that an escaped murderer has infiltrated the manor's rear courtyard." John Sterling's face paled. Several intoxicated guests, all high-ranking court officials, were resting in the rear courtyard. If anything happened to them, he would be held responsible. He immediately led his men to the rear courtyard, meticulously searching each room, wary of alarming the fugitive and provoking a reckless act. They reached a room with a closed door and drawn curtains. A sense of foreboding gripped them. Exchanging glances, they simultaneously kicked the door in. With a loud crash, the door splintered, revealing the scene within. On the intricately carved pearwood bed lay a man and a woman, clearly in the throes of passion. Even with the intrusion of onlookers, they seemed reluctant to stop. But whether they stopped or not was no longer relevant. John Sterling stared at the woman. Her delicate eyebrows and refined features confirmed his suspicions. It was the most beautiful woman in the Longwell kingdom, his fiancée, the second daughter of Carter Estate, Sophia Carter. What about the other man? He glanced coldly, and the guard beside him cried out in terror, His Royal Highness, the Crown Prince. Crown Prince Liam Sterling, his older brother, at his birthday banquet, in front of everyone, slept with his fiancée. He curled his lip in a sneer. The laughter and exclamations finally pulled the entangled couple apart. Liam Sterling rolled directly off Sophia Carter, instinctively wanting to crawl under the bed, but was pulled out by Andy Wright. Sophia Carter, having lost her cover, cowered and trembled, emitting piercing screams. The shrill cries attracted more guests, who flocked to the scene, their mouths agape at the shocking sight. Victoria Lennox, amidst the crowd, felt her knees weaken. If Edward Carter hadn't been supporting her, she would have collapsed immediately. Chapter 30. But now was not the time to collapse. Her daughter was lying there, exposed to countless cold stares. She struggled, took off her coat, and staggered towards her daughter, trying to cover her. But John Sterling coldly blocked her way. She swallowed, pleading, Your Highness, there must be a misunderstanding. John Sterling didn't speak, but slightly raised his sword, pointing it directly at her, causing her breath to catch. But the sword was only aimed at the coat in her hand. A sharp sword flash later, the coat was shredded into countless pieces, falling like snowflakes. John Sterling stepped on the debris and silently walked out. On the bed, exposed to the relentless gazes with nowhere to hide, Sophia Carter finally succumbed to the unbearable humiliation and fainted with a pathetic cry. In the flower hall, Tamara Carter sat calmly amidst a sea of jasmine flowers, drinking tea. The chaotic events in the back courtyard had nothing to do with her. She poured and drank her tea leisurely, then looked up and met a pair of calm eyes. It was John Sterling. Not going to watch the commotion? He asked. Nothing worth watching, Tamara Carter replied indifferently. I've had the experience of being caught in the act, and Your Highness was a witness, weren't you? So, Daniel Wright, was he killed by my older brother? John Sterling asked again. I don't know. Tamara Carter shook her head. Things without evidence shouldn't be spoken of lightly. John Sterling suddenly smirked. Your Highness shouldn't laugh, Tamara Carter stared at him. Logically, you should be rushing to the Emperor with this grievance. The Crown Prince lusts after his brother's wife, committing such an act in broad daylight, shaming the royal family and inviting public scorn. How can such a debauched and shameless person be chosen as the heir? This Crown Prince, his title is surely forfeit. You're right. I should indeed do that. John Sterling extended his hand towards her. Tamara Carter, I am John Sterling, pleased to meet you. Tamara Carter took his hand. The pleasure is all mine, Your Highness. John Sterling smiled faintly, lowering his head to look at her hand, her slender, white fingers, soft and warm to the touch. It was hard to imagine such a hand capable of battling demons, performing autopsies and judgments, and even invisibly shifting the destinies of herself and others. Your hand is beautiful, he whispered. I like it very much. Tamara Carter frowned slightly, her eyes calm and serene, undisturbed by his words. John Sterling sighed and stood up, striding away. Tamara Carter lowered her eyes and poured herself another cup of tea. Just as she was about to lift it, a chaotic fragrance swept past her, snatching the cup away. She frowned. If you want to drink, can't you pour it yourself? I prefer the mark of your lips on the cup. Lucas Sterling, leaning against the wisteria arbor like a boiled shrimp, dramatically brought his lips to the spot where Tamara Carter had just drunk from the cup. Tamara Carter immediately felt her stomach churn. Putting on an act. Lucas Sterling curled his lip. You didn't react when someone touched your hand, and now you're pretending to be pure. My hand is attached to my body. Who I let touch it is none of your business, Tamara Carter retorted, raising an eyebrow. But you're my fourth brother's wife. Lucas Sterling said shamelessly. If you consort with other men, my fourth brother will be heartbroken. Tamara Carter remained silent. Talking to such a person was indeed a waste of breath. She stood up gracefully, adjusted her clothes, and prepared to leave. Going where? Lucas Sterling darted forward, grabbing her hand. Do you think you've succeeded? Isn't this enough? Tamara Carter countered. Not enough. Lucas Sterling chuckled, shaking his head. Little stiff, how about a wager? What wager? Tamara Carter asked. I'll wager that even after this embarrassing incident, the Crown Prince won't be deposed, Sophia Carter will marry him as planned, and as for the fifth prince who just touched your hand. He chuckled softly. The Emperor will simply arrange another good marriage for him, or reward him with something he desires to keep him quiet. This matter will likely end with a whimper. I don't believe it. Tamara Carter shook her head firmly. Unless your Emperor has gone mad. How could he establish such a son as heir? He's already mad. Lucas Sterling laughed wickedly. Just wait and see. Tamara Carter stared at him, dumbfounded. Lucas Sterling laughed heartily, ignoring anyone else. Brother Lucas, what's so amusing? A clear, high-pitched female voice came through. Tamara Carter looked up and saw a lively woman in purple approaching. She wore a dark purple robe similar to Lucas Sterling's, her long hair flowing, strikingly beautiful. This kind of dark purple wasn't something just anyone could wear, it required good skin and temperament to carry off such a demanding color. Although Lucas Sterling was frivolous and unrestrained, the purple suited him. And this woman before her was clearly another who wore the noble and beautiful purple well. Her face was fair and translucent, with a high nose and cherry lips. Her large, bright eyes shone with a wild light as she stared unabashedly at Tamara Carter, assessing her from head to toe. Then, she spoke, "You're that Tamara Carter." The tone was extremely impolite, coupled with a haughty and arrogant expression, clearly that of a spoiled noblewoman. Tamara Carter blinked, replying indifferently, "Yes." "What are you saying to Brother Lucas?" the woman in purple continued to ask. "This, it seems you should ask your brother Lucas." Tamara Carter retorted, neither softly nor harshly. "I don't want to ask him, I want you to tell me." The woman in purple was clearly hostile. Tamara Carter frowned, glancing at Lucas Sterling. He had his arms crossed, a smile on his face, clearly enjoying the unfolding confrontation. And the woman opposite her truly resembled a tigress. Tamara Carter didn't want to cause trouble. She had enough problems already, just the worthless people in Carter Estate kept her extremely busy, and she didn't want to add another enemy. Especially not this kind of pointless romantic rival. She opened her mouth, her tone inquisitive, "Miss, are you and the third prince newly acquainted?" The woman in purple widened her eyes, replying loudly, "Of course not." "Do you understand him?" Tamara Carter asked again. "Of course I do." The woman in purple's voice rose another octave. "Then, you should know how he usually acts around women." A mocking smile played on Tamara Carter's lips. "He was just using a very boring and old-fashioned method to strike up a conversation with me. I found it very tedious, what do you think?" "You." The woman in purple raised an eyebrow, clenching her fists, and exclaimed angrily, "How dare you call my brother Lucas boring? Not only boring, but also shameless." Tamara Carter pretended not to see her clenched fists, nodding seriously. "Miss, with your beauty that surpasses the moon and your noble elegance, you should stay away from this kind of man." Having said that, she turned and left decisively, leaving the stunned woman in purple standing there. She wanted to get angry, but the woman had just praised her beauty and elegance, and if she got angry now, it seemed she would no longer be elegant. Hashtag Chapter 31 Strange Woman. She muttered, then put the woman out of her mind, wholeheartedly tugging at Lucas Sterling's sleeve, shaking it and calling, "Brother Lucas, will you take Yenner out to play?" Lucas Sterling curled his lip, "No good, no good. Be a good girl, Yenner. Brother Lucas is busy, go find someone else to play with." "Why aren't you free?" Sophie Taylor pouted, looking at him resentfully. "Aren't you free right now?" "Who said I'm free? I'm admiring a beauty, don't disturb me." Lucas Sterling crossed his arms, staring at Tamara Carter's retreating figure with a grin, smacking his lips with relish. "Beautiful. Such personality. I haven't seen such fresh goods in a long time. You." Sophie Taylor stamped her foot and stormed off. Lucas Sterling laughed heartily. "Trying to avoid work, are you? I won't let you get away with it. Just wait and see, my Yen sister isn't someone to be trifled with." In the gentle midday sun, in the quiet courtyard of Yen Cloud Pavilion, Tamara Carter lay on a swing chair, her eyes half closed, occasionally swaying gently. At this moment, the door creaked open. She slightly opened her eyes and saw a vibrant figure, carrying boundless resentment and indignation, swiftly swirling towards her. Very quickly, it arrived before her, a pair of tear-filled eyes angrily staring at her. "Second concubine, what is the matter?" Tamara Carter asked calmly. Victoria Lennox gritted her teeth, almost wanting to claw out those icy eyes. Unfortunately, she simply didn't possess that ability. "Did you do this today?" Her voice was hoarse and fierce. Is second concubine referring to Sophia's affair with the Crown Prince? Tamara Carter deliberately reiterated, satisfied to see Victoria Lennox's face turn liver-colored. Then, she chuckled, "Second concubine is quite the joker. Second sister is a person, not an object. How could I possibly have the power to strip her bare and deliver her to the Crown Prince? She was drugged with an aphrodisiac." Victoria Lennox suddenly bent down, her face magnifying before her. "It must have been you. It must have been you. No one else could have done it. Then may I ask, second concubine, how did I drug second sister?" Tamara Carter smiled and asked, "Since early this morning, I haven't even been near her, have I? If you suspect anyone, you should first suspect those around her." Victoria Lennox was speechless. Her mind was a jumble. In fact, she had always been suspicious. Tamara Carter indeed had no way to approach Sophia Carter, and she had always been cautious. But if it was the maidservant who administered the drug, it also seemed impossible. Sophia Carter's food and drink this morning were all prepared by her, and the people in the kitchen were all her confidants. Could it have been at the royal mansion? But Tamara Carter was making her first social appearance, and she didn't even know everyone there. How could anyone be at her command? Moreover, Sophia Carter had also consumed the food and drink at the royal mansion, and she was fine. She thought and thought, but couldn't figure it out. Yet, she stubbornly insisted, "In any case, this matter cannot be unrelated to you." Tamara Carter sneered, "You're right. Perhaps my mother's spirit is at work. Heaven sees what people do. You and your mother have done so many wicked things. Perhaps my mother has filed a complaint before the King of Hell, and it has fallen upon third sister. This is called retribution." "Yes, that's right, retribution. Retribution." Victoria Lennox suddenly burst into laughter, her expression crazed. She cackled, "Tamara Carter, do you know what I least believe in?" Tamara Carter curled her lip. "The thing I least believe in is retribution." Victoria Lennox gnashed her teeth. "In this world, there is no retribution. If a person is useless in life, they are even more useless after death, rotting away. My father fought on the battlefield, his long sword stained with the blood of enemies, yet he never saw any vengeful spirits come to claim his life. He now holds immense power and enjoys the utmost glory, while those vengeful spirits, who knows where they are drifting. You're right. Tamara Carter slowly straightened up, her icy eyes almost glued to Victoria Lennox. She spoke in a low but firm voice, "Vengeful spirits cannot claim lives, but I can." "You?" Victoria Lennox scoffed, "You truly overestimate yourself. You think after this, Sophia will never rise again. I'm here to tell you, your petty tricks are like a grasshopper kicking against a cart, eternally unable to hinder my sterling family's progress. Eternally unable. If you don't believe me, just wait and see." "Well then, let's wait and see." Tamara Carter closed her eyes slightly, reclining lazily once more. "Second aunt, please make yourself comfortable." Victoria Lennox glared at Tamara Carter unwillingly, then flicked her sleeves and left. Tamara Carter watched her retreating figure, her expression unreadable. Mabel Price cautiously asked from beside her, "Sister, do you think they have any way to salvage this?" Tamara Carter shook her head, "I don't know." She was a modern person, living in a time with a complete legal system. Although injustices occasionally occurred, overall, society still had justice. But this was the Longwell dynasty, the mindset of a feudal emperor, something she truly couldn't grasp. Patiently waiting for a night, early the next morning, John Sterling's people secretly delivered news. As Lucas Sterling predicted, although John Sterling went to file a complaint, tears streaming down his face, he didn't receive justice. Crown Prince Liam Sterling was scolded, punished by kneeling for a night, but remained the Crown Prince. Carter Estate's second daughter, Sophia Carter, due to this incident, turned misfortune into a blessing, being appointed as Crown Princess, with the wedding date to be chosen. Such a huge scandal was painted by the decree-delivering eunuch as a touching, legendary story that moved heaven and earth. The Crown Prince, harmed by villains, was afflicted by a bewildering poison, his mind in chaos, and to survive, he had to find a woman as an antidote. Sophia Carter, enduring humiliation, for the sake of the nation and the Crown Prince's health, willingly became the antidote, bearing great shame. How pitiful, how regrettable, how commendable. As for fifth Prince John Sterling, understanding the bigger picture, concerned with the overall situation, deeply affectionate and righteous towards the Crown Prince, to save his brother's life, willingly offered his own woman. His noble integrity, extraordinary demeanor, truly praiseworthy, admirable. He was specially rewarded with gold, silver, jewels, vast tracts of land, and a date was chosen to gather the capital's noblewomen for him to select another beauty. Kneeling in the main hall with Sterling's mother, listening to the imperial decree, Tamara Carter watched the eunuch's opening and closing mouth, his shrill voice, and felt the whole world become absurd. This matter was truly bizarre. How could this be? Watching the Sterling mother and daughter joyfully accepting the decree, Tamara Carter slowly closed her eyes, her heart heavy. It seemed she had truly oversimplified everything. The Sterling clan were imperial relatives, to put it bluntly, one family. How could one family take action against each other? Rubbing her knees, numb from kneeling for so long, she stood up, intending to return to Yen Cloud Pavilion, when the Sterling mother and daughter swaggeringly blocked her way. "I told you, didn't I?" Victoria Lennox laughed triumphantly, "Tamara Carter, you're still too inexperienced to fight me." Chapter 32, Indeed. Yesterday, still despondent over the adultery scandal, Sophia Carter now bloomed like a flower. Younger sister must thank elder sister. Younger sister was worried about fifth prince's matter, but elder sister took action, helping younger sister achieve her heart's desire. Younger sister doesn't know how to thank elder sister. After she finished speaking, laughing heartily, Tamara Carter lowered her eyes and said nothing. Defeat was defeat, she had to accept it. Returning to Yen Cloud Pavilion, she slept face down until late afternoon, then quietly ate dinner. As night fell, she left Mabel Price to watch the house and, changing into night clothes, slipped out. An hour later, she appeared at the gate of White Cloud Pavilion on White Cloud Mountain. Taking a deep breath, she rang the doorbell, 3 long rings, 2 short, neither heavy nor light, neither hurried nor slow. This was the arrangement between her and Lucas Sterling. She didn't want to come here, but she had to admit her own weakness and lack of information, while her enemies were powerful. Alex Malkin opened the door, smiling brightly upon seeing her. "So it's Miss Carter. It's been a while. Are you well?" "I am well," Tamara Carter replied. "Has His Highness Donovan's condition improved?" "Much better." Alex Malkin replied cheerfully. "My master always speaks of you, saying you are the true divine healer." Tamara Carter smiled. "It's good that he's well. Is the Third Highness here?" "Are you looking for the Third Highness?" Alex Malkin seemed stunned. "He's not here today." "Not here? Is there any way to contact him?" Tamara Carter asked. "Contact him?" Alex Malkin looked even more perplexed. "If Miss Carter wishes to find His Highness the Prince of Siang, you should go to the Siang Palace. Don't you know, Miss Carter, that the Third Highness and my master are at odds and rarely interact? The last time they were both here was half a year ago." "Is that so?" Tamara Carter unconsciously stopped. It seemed she had been deceived by that boastful braggart. "If he's not here, then I won't disturb you further." Tamara Carter, her heart burning with anxiety, turned to leave, but heard a voice call from behind, "Are you going to leave without coming in, Miss Carter?" Tamara Carter turned her head. In the dim light among the flowers, Lorenzo Sky, dressed in white, was slowly approaching. She bowed her head. "Your Highness, Prince Yun. Now that you're here, why leave in such a hurry?" Lorenzo Sky stood before her, his voice and demeanor gentle. "Are you well?" "I am well," Tamara Carter replied reluctantly. "You don't seem well to me." Lorenzo Sky looked at her with a gentle gaze. "You seem to have lost weight and look unwell. The people in the Carter estate, are they difficult to deal with?" His words, light as a breeze, brought a sting to Tamara Carter's eyes. These days at the Carter estate, every moment was torment. With no one to rely on, no one trustworthy, and those around her shrouded in suspicion, she was like a bristling hedgehog, expending all her energy. These days were truly difficult to describe. Her throat tightened. She remained silent, offering only a forced smile. Lorenzo Sky, seemingly understanding, turned to Alex Malkin and instructed, "Go down the mountain and summon my third brother. Tell him I have something to discuss with him." Alex Malkin nodded and left. Lorenzo Sky naturally reached out and placed his hand on Tamara Carter's shoulder, speaking softly, "Wait here a moment. I believe he will arrive soon." "Thank you, Your Highness, Prince Yun." Tamara Carter rubbed her eyes, swallowing the bitter lump in her throat. "You healed my illness, this small matter is nothing." Lorenzo Sky smirked slightly. "But His Highness Donovan saved my life." Tamara Carter sniffled. Lorenzo Sky laughed heartily, "So, we share a life and death connection. Enough of this, you seem cold. The night dew is chilly, come inside and warm up." He led her into the room, where the dim golden candlelight cast a warm glow. Lorenzo Sky brewed tea. With a warm cup in hand, the subtle fragrance of the tea mingled with Lorenzo Sky's light, refreshing scent, bringing a sense of peace and tranquility to Tamara Carter's heart. She wasn't a talkative person, and nestled in the room, she found herself at a loss for words, simply gazing at Lorenzo Sky. Lorenzo Sky, under her gaze, chuckled, "Is there something on my face?" "Ah. No." Tamara Carter shook her head, slightly embarrassed. "Having spent so much time with your third brother, being with you now evokes a strange feeling." "What feeling?" Lorenzo Sky inquired. "I marvel at the wonders of creation." Tamara Carter sighed. "You share the same face, yet your personalities and auras are completely different. It's truly remarkable." If my third brother and I wore the same clothes and stood side by side, without speaking, could you tell us apart? Lorenzo Sky asked. Yes. Tamara Carter affirmed. Oh. That confident? Lorenzo Sky smiled. Why? I can't explain it clearly. Tamara Carter shook her head. I just feel that you two are different. When I see you, I feel a sense of calm and security, but when I see him, I can't help but feel angry, furious, and driven mad. Why? Lorenzo Sky asked curiously. He's quite popular with women. Many women adore him. I don't know. Perhaps, our horoscopes clash, or maybe in a past life, I was the man and he was the woman, and I ended up killing him and dumping his body in a graveyard, so now he's chasing me for revenge in this life. Tamara Carter thought of Lucas Sterling's smug face, and an unnamed anger filled her heart. That bastard. If he hadn't brought her predecessor to Carter Estate, she wouldn't have died tragically, wouldn't have transmigrated, and wouldn't be playing these palace games in this ancient era. Seeing her fiery expression, Lorenzo Sky burst out laughing. They say that enemies are destined to meet. Perhaps this is also a kind of fate, he said casually. I don't want any kind of fate with him. Tamara Carter fumed. He's the kind of person who, with a full belly, finds amusement in toying with others. Yes, you're right. He's scum. We shouldn't get angry at such scum. Lorenzo Sky skillfully changed the subject. I remember you seem to be very fond of flowers, right? I do like flowers, but how did you know, and even gift me the orchid of tranquil grace? Tamara Carter asked. Such a precious flower, aren't you afraid of giving it to the wrong person? Not at all. Lorenzo Sky gently shook his head, his eyes softening. Do you remember the first night you came to White Cloud Pavilion? You wandered alone in my flower garden for a long time. Since arriving at White Cloud Pavilion, you've always been aloof, only smiling when amidst the flowers. If it weren't for your love of them, why would you smile so brightly? Tamara Carter smiled and nodded. Indeed, I've always enjoyed tending to flowers, but since arriving at Carter Estate, I've been constantly occupied with tedious matters, leaving no leisure time. Seeing so many exotic flowers and plants here is truly delightful. Lorenzo Sky looked at her and asked, if you like them. Would you accept this entire garden as a gift? Chapter 33. Tamara Carter waved her hands repeatedly. How could I? I already feel uneasy about accepting the orchid you gifted me. Besides, I truly don't have the time to care for them. It's no problem, I'll have the servants tend to them for you. Lorenzo Sky seemed determined, and softly called, Belinda. A young servant in white linen clothes responded respectfully, Your Highness, what are your orders? Make preparations. Later, accompany Miss Carter back to her residence and construct a garden like mine at her Yen Cloud Pavilion. Oh. Belinda appeared surprised. This. Enough, go and make the arrangements. Lorenzo Sky, his face calm, waved his hand, dismissing him. Belinda, wanting to speak but hesitating, looked seriously at Tamara Carter, then respectfully replied, I'll attend to it immediately. Tamara Carter felt very apologetic and repeatedly declined. Lorenzo Sky said calmly, You're in a difficult situation, and I can't offer much assistance. Giving you some flowers and plants for solace is hardly a significant gesture. Seeing his sincerity, Tamara Carter accepted. After another cup of tea, she heard Alex Malkin calling from outside, Your Highness, the third prince has arrived. He's waiting at the 10-herb pavilion. Lorenzo Sky responded with a simple then turned to Tamara Carter, You should go. I won't see you out. I've been sitting for a while and feel a bit tired. I'd like to lie down for a bit. Please, make yourself comfortable, Your Highness. Tamara Carter stood up and followed Alex Malkin outside. At the 10-herb pavilion, Lucas Sterling was lounging with his legs crossed, snacking. Seeing Tamara Carter, he mumbled, "Little stiff, so hasty. What brings you here? You know perfectly well." Tamara Carter retorted irritably. "Oh, who has angered you? Such a fiery temper. Are you here to beg for my help?" Lucas Sterling picked at his ear with a look of disdain. "My ears are delicate, they prefer sweet words. If you can't speak pleasantly, I'll be leaving." He swayed as he stood up, pretending to leave. Tamara Carter knew he was teasing her, but she couldn't help but yield, forcing herself to soften her tone. "Your Third Highness is truly insightful. Everything unfolded exactly as you predicted that day. I concede." Lucas Sterling laughed heartily, "Rare indeed. Our little stiff finally admits defeat." He looked into Tamara Carter's eyes, his sly gaze flitting across her face, his tone becoming even more frivolous. "That flushed little face, like a cherry, intoxicates me. You're much more appealing when you concede than when you're stubborn." Tamara Carter, both embarrassed and angry at his, retorted indignantly, "Stop your sarcasm. How did I end up in this predicament? Isn't it thanks to you? Bringing up the past again?" Lucas Sterling raised an eyebrow and put his hands on his hips. "All right, let's make things clear today. That day, your mother was gravely ill, you sought help everywhere but found none, and you wanted to sell yourself into servitude, correct? So what?" Tamara Carter coldly replied, "I'd rather be a beast of burden in a foreign land than be tortured by my own relatives. Come on. A brat like you, who would buy you as a maid?" Lucas Sterling snorted contemptuously, "When I saved you, there was a group of thugs who wanted to buy you and take you to a brothel. Tell me, is it better to be played to death in a brothel, or to be played to death at Carter Estate?" Tamara Carter's jaw dropped, speechless for a long while. Damn, both ways to die were clearly extremely tragic. Those under the eaves cannot help but bow their heads. She sighed and said, "Stop with the superfluous words. Just tell me, do you have any way to deal with the Crown Prince?" "I certainly do." Lucas Sterling nodded confidently. "However, if you want my method, you must also help me answer a question." "Tell me." Tamara Carter replied. "On John's birthday, I still haven't figured out how you poisoned him, and I'm very puzzled." Lucas Sterling said with a perplexed expression, "Tell me, how did you do it? Do you remember the fifth prince's residence being filled with jasmine flowers?" Tamara Carter asked. "Everyone could smell the jasmine fragrance," Lucas Sterling replied, "but only the two of them went crazy. That's because only the two of them were exposed to a type of herb called horny goat weed." Tamara Carter explained, "Jasmine flowers inherently have an aphrodisiac effect. When encountering horny goat weed, the effect is greatly enhanced, and the longer the duration, the stronger the potency. If further stimulated by alcohol, it becomes as potent as an aphrodisiac." These two were already exchanging glances during the banquet. How could they possibly resist? This method is truly bizarre. Lucas Sterling's jaw dropped. "But how did you administer the poison?" Sophia Carter's medicinal liquid was mixed into her face powder beforehand by my people, and as for the Crown Prince, that was naturally Ivan Wright's handiwork." Tamara Carter replied. "Truly done without the gods or ghosts knowing. You are very clever." Lucas Sterling sighed softly. "But I painstakingly calculated, and in the end, it was all for nothing." Tamara Carter said dejectedly, "Doesn't Longwell Kingdom have laws? The matter was ultimately painted in such a way. I can't understand it no matter how much I think about it. What's there to not understand?" Lucas Sterling sneered, "This world belongs to my father, the laws are also set by my father. If he says black is black, then white is also black. If he says white is white, then black is also white. What is power? It is precisely this. Supreme, unique, he can set fires, but you cannot light a lamp. It is precisely this. But why would he cover for the Crown Prince? Tamara Carter remained baffled. He's clearly foolish, stupid, and hot-headed. Why value him so much? You just stated the reason. Lucas Sterling said calmly, it is precisely because he is foolish, stupid, and hot-headed that he became the crown prince. Huh? Tamara Carter was astonished. Because only a foolish and stupid son wouldn't dare covet the imperial power in his hands, right? Lucas Sterling laughed strangely, establishing such a foolish son as a shield can also easily probe the intentions of the other sons. This has 100 advantages and not a single disadvantage. How could someone as intelligent as my father not do it? Tamara Carter patted her forehead, but, that's his own flesh and blood. Aren't you Edward Carter's own flesh and blood? Lucas Sterling retorted. Tamara Carter was speechless. Those in the center of power have no room for personal feelings, only absolute benefit. The royal family is ruthless, haven't you realized this until today? Lucas Sterling's expression suddenly darkened. Tamara Carter sighed softly, no, I've known for a long time. Even before she transmigrated to this strange world, she knew how great the temptation of power was. Her own parents were swallowed by it. Remembering her past and present lives, she couldn't help but feel sorrowful. For a long time, she didn't speak a word. Lucas Sterling also seemed lost in thought, his eyes filled with a deep, painful gloom. He, too, remained silent, and the room fell into a profound stillness. After a long while, Tamara Carter regained her composure and looked at Lucas Sterling. He still seemed immersed in some memory, his eyes glistening with what looked like tears, yet his face was grim. She sighed and interrupted his thoughts, I've said everything I need to say. If you have any good ideas, just speak plainly. Startled by her words, Lucas Sterling was momentarily dazed. His eyes flickered uncertainly, unlike his usual aggressive demeanor. His voice became low and gentle as he calmly said, Little stiff, shall we go to the Eternal Spring Garden tomorrow to watch a play? Chapter 34, Indeed. Lucas Sterling replied softly. Didn't you know? His Highness, the Crown Prince, is a theater enthusiast. The Eternal Spring Garden is his sanctuary. In his free time, he even likes to impersonate actors and sing a few lines on stage for fun. Tomorrow, we'll go there to support him. Tamara Carter knew he had a plan and didn't press him further, only asking, what time tomorrow? After you finish dinner, wait for me at the entrance of the Eternal Spring Garden. Lucas Sterling finished speaking, then, as if a thought struck him, he suddenly brightened. You like wearing men's clothing. Just disguise yourself as a man tomorrow, it's also good for concealing your identity. That's not a problem. Tamara Carter replied. Then it's settled. Tomorrow at the Eternal Spring Garden, we won't leave until we meet. We won't leave until we meet. Lucas Sterling tilted his head, smiling mischievously. Then I'll go back first. Tamara Carter stood up. Lucas Sterling lazily hummed in agreement. Tamara Carter turned and headed for the door. Belinda was waiting outside. Seeing her, she said, Miss Carter, everything is prepared. I will accompany you back to Carter Estate. Where is Prince Donovan? Tamara Carter looked towards Lorenzo Sky's room. His Highness has already retired for the night. Belinda replied. It's already the rat hour. His Highness lives a regular life, always rising and sleeping early. I'm afraid he won't be able to see Miss Carter off. It's unnecessary. I was just asking casually. Visiting so late at night, I've already troubled him enough. Tamara Carter glanced once more at the quiet courtyard, sighed softly, and lightly descended the mountain. Remembering her appointment with Lucas Sterling, she woke up early the next morning. As soon as she opened the window, she saw Belinda directing people busily working in the courtyard. It turned out that the previously planted flowers and grass had been completely removed, and new flowers and trees were constantly being brought in. Mabel Price was sprawled on a round table, watching the activity with amusement. Seeing Tamara Carter awake, she called out cheerfully, "Sister, where did you find so many handsome men? Every single one is so good-looking." Tamara Carter chuckled softly, but Mabel Price wasn't wrong. Lorenzo Sky, with his ethereal beauty, had followers who were also remarkably handsome. Even the young errand boys were quite refined and presentable. Seeing her emerge, they bowed in unison, "Greetings, Miss Carter. Thank you for your trouble." Tamara Carter smiled, then turned to Mabel Price. "Please ensure they are well taken care of. With this heat, provide them with ample tea, water, and food. Don't delay." "What are you saying, sister?" Mabel Price winked. "If they were a bunch of roughnecks, I might be inclined to be lazy, but with such handsome young men, how could I possibly neglect them?" Tamara Carter chuckled and went to wash and comb her hair. She and Mabel Price spent the day attending to Lorenzo Sky's men. These men were well-mannered, efficient, and quick in their work. By sunset, Yen Cloud Pavilion was a lush expanse of flowers and trees. The plants and flowers, tall and short, were interspersed artfully, creating a visually pleasing scene. Tamara Carter hosted a feast, raising her glass and conversing with the workers, prompting Mrs. Sterling and her son to sneak peeks several times. However, planting flowers and trees in spring was commonplace, so after a few glances, they lost interest. Belinda's side seemed to still have many unfinished tasks. After dinner, she plunged back into the midst of the plants and trees, busily working. Remembering her appointment with Lucas Sterling, Tamara Carter didn't inquire further and went to her room to pack. She finished her preparations quickly and gracefully exited the main gate of Carter Estate. As soon as she stepped outside, she noticed furtive tails following her. She sneered inwardly. Did these mediocre individuals think they could track her? She quickened her pace, leaving them far behind in no time. After half an hour, Tamara Carter, in elegant white robes, appeared at the entrance of Spring Delight Garden. She arrived a bit early. Spring Delight Garden was still empty. Unhurried, she strolled casually by the entrance, taking the opportunity to observe the surrounding terrain. Engrossed in her observation, she suddenly heard a coquettish female voice beside her ear, "Are you waiting for someone, young master?" Tamara Carter turned her head. In the dim twilight, a tall woman stood facing her. With elegant, flirtatious eyebrows, she looked at Tamara Carter shyly. This wasn't the first time she'd encountered such a situation. The last time she stood in for Mabel Price, she'd met an infatuated woman. Being a woman herself, she found such encounters amusing. She replied calmly, "Is there something I can help you with, miss?" The woman repeatedly cast flirtatious glances at her. "Nothing in particular, but I think the person you're waiting for might be me." Tamara Carter was surprised. Were ancient women so bold and forward? Seducing men in the middle of the street, perhaps she was a clandestine prostitute? She shook her head, firmly replying, "The person I'm waiting for is not you." "You're so unkind, young master." The woman pouted, her eyes reddening slightly. "Such a fine young man like you, and I feel a stirring in my heart just looking at you. Can't I even get close?" "You." Tamara Carter nearly jumped. What kind of world was this, where women could openly flirt with men? She was about to get angry when she saw the woman grin. As she laughed, a flaw was revealed. The unrestrained, seductive laughter was deep and resonant, a sound very familiar. Tamara Carter gasped, exclaiming, "Lucas Sterling." "Hush! Quiet!" Lucas Sterling hastily covered her mouth, still chuckling. "So. How's my disguise? Am I alluring enough?" Tamara Carter was surprised, then horrified, then. She burst into uproarious laughter. He disguised himself as a woman. And such a captivating one at that. What's even more astonishing is that his disguise was so convincing that she didn't recognize him standing right in front of her. Watching Lucas Sterling swaying his hips, Tamara Carter laughed until tears streamed down her face. She clutched her stomach, squatting down, laughter still erupting from her chest, until she coughed and choked. "My lord, I'm impressed. I bow down to you. No need, there's really no need for such formalities." Lucas Sterling squatted down, tilting his head to look at her face. "Little stiffy, I'm telling you, you should smile more. Look how beautiful you are when you smile, like a flower. You're always frowning, it's not auspicious, you know. Even if I'm filled with bitterness and hatred inside, I must remain calm on the outside. That's called poise. Poise, understand?" Tamara Carter laughed until her insides ached, finally catching her breath. Lucas Sterling, as if intentionally trying to make her die of laughter, swayed his hips and clung to her arm. "This servant has amused you so much, won't you reward me with something?" Tamara Carter was speechless, muttering, "Are you sure about this? With your large build, aren't you afraid of attracting more attention? I have my own tricks up my sleeve. Don't worry." Lucas Sterling pulled her hand, turning into an alley. "It's still early, that guy isn't here yet. Accompany me to the night market." He kept pulling her along, and Tamara Carter couldn't resist, so she let him do as he pleased. The capital night market was indeed bustling. Although not as lively and noisy as during the day, there were still many stalls, mostly selling women's items, cosmetics, jewelry, fragrant sachets, and the like. Everywhere she looked, it glittered and sparkled, even more dazzling and beautiful under the bright red lanterns. Tamara Carter, however, wasn't very interested. She never liked these things. Even in modern times, she lived a simple life, without makeup or cosmetics, almost isolated from these feminine items. ####Chapter 35. Seeing her indifferent expression, Lucas Sterling was surprised. He leaned in to look at her closely, then suddenly said, "Are you really a man?" Tamara Carter retorted sarcastically, "Are you really a woman?" "Of course not." Lucas Sterling grinned. "You can verify my true identity. Do you dare to let me verify yours?" "Ridiculous." Tamara Carter spat. Lucas Sterling shrugged indifferently. As they walked and talked, they passed by a pharmacy and suddenly saw someone collapse inside. Actually, it wasn't a collapse, but rather the person being thrown out by the pharmacy's assistant, who was still cursing, "I told you, your money is gone, yet you keep coming here and pestering us. If you dare to come again, I'll break your legs." The person thrown out was a ragged old man, accompanied by a girl about 10 years old. Although the assistant was aggressive, the girl was bold and retorted sharply, "My father's heirloom treasure, worth a king's ransom, was swindled by your master with sweet words and false promises. Now that he has it, he refuses to acknowledge us. Tell your master he must cure this illness, whether he wants to or not, otherwise, he'll never have a moment's peace." "Oh, you impudent little girl, such a big mouth for such a small person." The waiter swung his fist. "I'll teach you some respect." His fists rained down on the girl, who, while dodging the blows, continued to yell, "Either return my father's treasure or cure his illness. Otherwise, I, Jiu Ling, will make sure your business suffers, even if it costs me my life." Lucas Sterling chuckled. "Hey, little stiff, doesn't this girl remind you of yourself? Stubborn as a mule." Tamara Carter glared at him and stepped in front of the waiter. "Leave her alone," she said coldly. "Who's this pretty boy?" The waiter slurred. "Shouldn't you be warming some rich man's bed instead of meddling here?" Tamara Carter's hand flew up in a series of slaps. Slap. 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 The stunned waiter, realizing he'd crossed the wrong person, wet himself and fled back into the pharmacy, slamming the door shut. "Thank you for saving me." The girl kowtowed. "May I know your honorable name so I can repay your kindness in the future?" "Your name is Jiu Ling?" Tamara Carter asked. "Yes, benefactor. My mother, a former opera singer, named me Jiu Ling." Jiu Ling looked up. Tamara Carter was taken aback. In the darkness, she hadn't noticed the girl's unusual appearance. A bloody red birthmark covered half of Jiu Ling's face, a startling sight under the lamplight. Yet, the other half was breathtakingly beautiful, with captivating phoenix eyes and rosy cheeks. Seeing Tamara Carter staring, Jiu Ling lowered her head and asked hoarsely, "Are you frightened, benefactor?" Tamara Carter answered honestly, "Not frightened, just a little surprised." "Jiu Ling, take your father home. You're outnumbered, you can't fight them." She turned to Lucas Sterling. "You have plenty of silver. Give some to her." "Any objections?" Lucas Sterling pouted. "Your problem, your responsibility. Why should I pay?" "Miser." Tamara Carter reached into his pocket, pulled out a silver ingot, and handed it to Jiu Ling. Lucas Sterling wailed, "Hey! Why are you robbing me instead of paying yourself? I was in a hurry and forgot my money." Seeing his pained expression, Tamara Carter kicked him playfully. "Haven't you earned enough from me? If you argue again, I won't visit you anymore." Lucas Sterling's eyes lit up as he nuzzled against her, his hands wandering. "Don't say that, my lord. I was wrong, all right. Let me rub your chest, don't be angry." Tamara Carter's skin crawled under his touch. As they were dragged along to a secluded spot, she gritted her teeth and said, "Lucas Sterling, enough. Not enough. My lord, I want more." Lucas Sterling writhed like a rope. Tamara Carter pinched him hard on the chest, eliciting a strange cry, and only then did he stop. After their boisterous antics, they heard the drums and gongs from the spring song pavilion starting up, so they hurried back. By now, more than half the patrons had arrived at the spring song pavilion. The two sat down in a corner on the second floor, and soon enough, they saw Liam Sterling swagger in, surrounded by a throng of servants and guards. As soon as he appeared, the theater owner, like an eager puppy, wagged his tail and bobbed his head at him. "Your Highness, you've arrived. Oh my, these past few days without you, our spring song pavilion has been utterly spiritless. Everyone has missed you. What play is being performed today?" Liam Sterling inquired with interest. "A newly staged palace drama, a truly excellent one," the owner flattered. "We were just worried about who would play the Emperor, and how fortunate that you've arrived. Your Highness, you are the future Emperor, this role, no one but you could play it. Ah, and playing opposite the Emperor, as the noble consort, is Hanny Evans, your favorite." "Really?" Liam Sterling, his enthusiasm piqued, hurried backstage. Lucas Sterling couldn't help but whistle. "Today's play is going to be a good one." Tamara Carter, unaware of his scheme, simply observed quietly. Soon, the stage became lively, with a troupe of martial artists singing operatically, tumbling, and fighting. The audience below cheered and applauded continuously, but Tamara Carter found herself growing sleepy. She simply couldn't understand it. This play tells the story of Emperor Ethan Young's ascension to the throne. Lucas Sterling helpfully explained from beside her. Emperor Ethan Young was originally a great general. The emperor at the time was a tyrannical and incompetent ruler, and the people suffered. Emperor Ethan Young emerged, launched a rebellion, seized the throne, and ultimately achieved imperial power. The theater dares to perform such a play? Tamara Carter asked curiously. Emperor Ethan Young is the figure our father admires most. Lucas Sterling revealed the underlying meaning. Didn't you know? Before our father achieved imperial power, he also held the position of Grand General. That explains it. Tamara Carter nodded. Praising his great achievements, he would naturally allow it. Therefore, the scene of seizing the throne is practically an indispensable part of every theater's repertoire. Lucas Sterling chuckled. Look at the opposite balcony, the man sitting in the VIP box, see him? Tamara Carter followed his gaze, and with just a glance, her body trembled slightly. Astonished, she said, "The Emperor is here too?" Today's performance is specifically for him. If he didn't come, what would be the fun? Lucas Sterling shook his head. But I still don't understand. If the Emperor enjoys this play, and the Crown Prince performs it, it can only please the Emperor. How can we possibly use this to our advantage? She was bewildered. Hashtag Chapter 36 Watching a play is a matter of patience. Just stay calm and keep watching, Lucas Sterling said, taking a handful of sunflower seeds and cracking them contentedly. After a prelude, Liam Sterling, playing the Emperor, finally made his grand entrance. Though somewhat foolish in demeanor, his acting was impeccable, capturing the right expressions and movements. His singing voice, once lifted, was equally stunning, eliciting continuous cheers. Liam Sterling, engrossed in his singing, walked straight to the front of the stage. The bright lights shone upon him, making his bright yellow imperial robe sparkle even more. The embroidered dragons on the hem of his robe seemed to come alive, swaying with his movements, creating a captivating spectacle. The audience below applauded wildly, their praises growing louder with each wave. In this moment of heightened excitement, Tamara Carter suddenly realized that Alexander Sterling, who had been sitting opposite her, had vanished. As she searched around, another commotion erupted on stage. Liam Sterling, mid-performance, was forcefully pulled down by someone. The incident happened so abruptly, and the person who pulled him acted so swiftly, that he didn't even have time to cry out before disappearing from the stage. The audience below was shocked, the scene descending into chaos. Lucas Sterling, with a hidden smirk, tugged at the corner of Tamara Carter's garment and whispered in her ear, "It's done. This time, our Crown Prince is definitely dead." "Why?" Tamara Carter asked hurriedly, her curiosity about to explode. Lucas Sterling deliberately teased her, pouting his red lips and saying in a coquettish voice, "Give me a kiss, and I'll tell you everything." Under the dim lights, this androgynous figure before her flirted with a charming posture, even more captivating than a true woman. Tamara Carter noticed that several older gentlemen nearby seemed to be gulping. What is a demon? This person in front of her was probably the perfect example of a demon. Demons are always both male and female, male when male, female when female. Demons are genderless, and demons are often so beautiful that they are inhuman. As the androgynous individual's enchanting lips drew closer, Tamara Carter truly wanted to jump off a building. But her waist was suddenly tightened, embraced by the demon's long arm. He leaned close to her ear, gently exhaling, and smiled slyly like a fox. "Don't resist," he reverted to his normal voice, whispering in her ear. "No man would refuse a beauty offering herself willingly. If you don't want to be seen through, then obediently let me kiss you." Tamara Carter's eyes suddenly widened. The next second, those enchanting red lips locked onto hers, soft, carrying a bittersweet yet fragrant breath. Tamara Carter closed her eyes, her teeth clenched tight. Inhale, hold, inhale. She was about to suffocate, and he was still tracing her lips with his tongue. Someone nearby chuckled. Tamara Carter freed one hand and fiercely pinched the hard object poking into her waist. Lucas Sterling gasped. Tamara Carter lowered her voice and said coldly, "Withdraw your tongue, or I'll cripple your whip." "You're so naughty, young master." Lucas Sterling squirmed, finally releasing her. Tamara Carter refused to let go, gripping the leather whip and forcefully pulling him along, the two clinging together like conjoined twins. In the shadowy alley, Tamara Carter began her interrogation. "Speak, what happened?" she demanded fiercely, her demeanor such that any passerby ignorant of the situation would surely mistake them for a couple engaged in a passionate outdoor tryst. "Ouch, little ghoul, be gentler, will you?" Lucas Sterling, having lost everything in a moment of carelessness and now with his weakness in her grasp, pleaded, I'll talk, I'll tell you everything. The Crown Prince's dragon robe is the real deal." Really?" Tamara Carter was stunned. "Absolutely. Lucas Sterling declared triumphantly, "He's wearing my father's dragon robe, woven by skilled artisans over a year, using precious gold threads. The dragons embroidered on it are a masterpiece, and most importantly, it's impervious to swords and spears. There's only one in the world, utterly unique." "Then how did it end up on him?" Tamara Carter asked, astonished. "What do you think?" Lucas Sterling raised an eyebrow. "It's this genius's handiwork, of course." "Then, how could the Crown Prince not know?" Tamara Carter inquired further. "In the dim light, the theatrical robes in the opera house look very similar. How could he tell the difference?" "But isn't the lighting in the brothel also dim? How did your father recognize it at a glance? Isn't that obvious? You wouldn't recognize a precious item you wear every day. Besides, not everyone can create those dragons embroidered on the hem." "I see." Tamara Carter exclaimed, suddenly understanding, then questioned, "So what if he's wearing his robe? Your father is so magnanimous, maybe he'll just cry a bit and let it go." Tamara Carter breathed a sigh of relief. "So, my wish will finally be fulfilled." Seeing the person she hated about to descend into hell, her heart filled with both glee and excitement. Clenching her fists, she suddenly heard a pathetic cry beside her. Her face flushed as Lucas Sterling slid down the wall, wailing, "I'm dying. I'm being crushed to death by you." Tamara Carter snorted in annoyance, "Who told you to meddle?" Lucas Sterling grimaced, replying, "You're a medical practitioner, you should know, this is a normal male reaction. To encounter a beauty and not act, wouldn't that be a waste of a life?" "What nonsense!" Tamara Carter, both angry and amused, turned away, fearing he might utter more improprieties, and said gruffly, "I'm leaving." "Ouch, my lady, help me up," Lucas Sterling groaned, clutching his stomach, "My stomach is killing me." Tamara Carter initially thought he was feigning, but upon closer inspection, she saw his pale face and cold sweat, clearly indicating intense pain. She hurriedly stepped forward to check his pulse. The pulse was surging, incredibly strange, unlike anything she had encountered before, and her expression changed drastically. "Could it be you also have the same hidden illness as His Highness Donovan?" she hastily inquired. Lucas Sterling weakly replied, "What do you think? Born of the same mother, raised in the same place, if he's afflicted by this strange poison, how could I possibly escape it? Go to the pleasure house and find Agua to help me." Tamara Carter ran headlong, but the pleasure house was now dark, silent as the grave, clearly indicating the gravity of the recent events. Everyone had been dispersed. She had no choice but to run back to Lucas Sterling, who lay sprawled on the ground like a pile of mud, unable to get up, his breathing increasingly labored. Although she had always disliked him, he had just helped her vent her anger, and she couldn't bear to leave him to die. Gritting her teeth, she sat down, pulled Lucas Sterling's arms over her shoulders, and tried to carry him. Chapter 37. But she had underestimated Lucas Sterling's weight, as well as overestimated the endurance of her own body. With a thud, they both tumbled to the ground. "Damn it!" Tamara Carter cursed, looking back at Lucas Sterling, who seemed to be only exhaling, no longer inhaling. Panicked, she looked around. The surroundings were desolate and silent, not even a ghost in sight, let alone reinforcements. She could only rely on her own frail body. Taking a deep breath, tightening her stomach, and gritting her teeth, she used all her strength to hoist him onto her back. Her legs trembled, but she shuffled forward step by step. Lucas Sterling's hidden illness had relapsed, leaving him utterly drained, almost lifeless, yet his consciousness remained. He only felt his body swaying violently, his chest constricted with a sharp pain. It was Tamara Carter's spine. If he hadn't been lying on it, he wouldn't have known how thin she truly was. Her back was narrow, and through the thin spring coat, he could almost feel each vertebra, fragile and delicate. He feared he would break her spine instantly, and his heart suddenly tightened, burning with pain. For the first time, he realized the cruelty of his past actions towards her. The world had been too unfair to her, and he had wanted to push her to the brink. But sometimes, the fate of some people is predetermined from birth, inescapable, unavoidable. Tamara Carter's strength had reached its limit, but she gritted her teeth and persevered until she saw the horse tied in front of the inn. Her suspended heart finally eased. Pulling, tugging, and straining, she finally managed to help Lucas Sterling onto the horse. Seeing his ashen face, as if on the verge of fainting, she couldn't help but feel another wave of anxiety. She patted his face, softly calling, "Hey, wake up, don't sleep, you might die in your sleep." Lucas Sterling groaned twice and opened his eyes. Tamara Carter asked, "Where is your residence?" She couldn't take him back to Carter Estate, it would be troublesome if they were discovered. Lucas Sterling weakly gestured in a direction. Tamara Carter spurred the horse into a gallop, racing all the way until they finally reached the Siang Prince's mansion. The servants in the mansion were startled to see their master, who had left walking upright, return lying flat. They rushed to assist, carrying Lucas Sterling into his bedchamber. Someone who looked like a steward fetched a blue porcelain bottle and expertly administered medicine to him, while others prepared and brought in an ice bath. Despite their panicked expressions, their movements were precise and practiced, clearly indicating prior experience with this situation. Lucas Sterling, thrown onto the cold, icy surface, miraculously revived quickly. Tamara Carter found it strange. Though knowledgeable in medicine, she had never witnessed such a cold treatment method. Lucas Sterling's ailment, as swift in its departure as its arrival, vanished within the time it takes to burn an incense stick. He stood before her, robed and grinning. "Hey, don't try anything funny with me, all right?" Tamara Carter looked at him suspiciously. "I swear to heaven and earth. Absolutely not." Lucas Sterling shook his head seriously. "Just now, thank you very much. Otherwise, the consequences would have been dire." "Death?" Tamara Carter asked. Lucas Sterling replied, "Impotence." "So, I've saved your entire life's happiness." Tamara Carter pouted, brushed off her clothes, and said, "Since you're all right, I'm leaving." "It's late, don't go back now." Lucas Sterling stopped her. "It's pouring rain outside." Tamara Carter opened the window to look. Indeed, it was raining heavily. She hesitated for a moment, then stubbornly said, "It's all right, it's not cold. At worst, I'll just get wet." "Then what's the point?" Lucas Sterling softly persuaded, "It's the third watch, and it's pouring. You're walking alone on the road. Aren't you afraid of encountering bad people? If you run into a patrol, they'll arrest you and hand you over to your father. Won't you be tortured again?" Tamara Carter pondered for a moment and felt that Lucas Sterling's words were not unreasonable. She was the legitimate daughter of Carter Estate. Wandering outside late at night, who knows what kind of dirty water might be poured on her. Moreover, with the recent incident involving the Crown Prince, it was a sensitive time, and it was better to be cautious. Seeing her thinking for a long time without speaking, Lucas Sterling hurriedly said, "Don't worry, although I, Lucas Sterling, have a reputation for being a flirt, a fierce butcher like you really doesn't pique my interest. You can rest assured." "What did you say?" Tamara Carter raised an eyebrow. "Does this lady desire you? Does this lady need to be interested in scum like you?" All right. All right. I'm scum, I'm a bad guy, I'm talkative, okay?" Lucas Sterling raised his hands in surrender. "It's late, can we not argue anymore? Let's wash up and sleep." "Who's washing up and sleeping with you?" Tamara Carter glared at him again. "Slip of the tongue. Completely a slip of the tongue." Lucas Sterling waved his hand with a chuckle. "I meant, we wash up, and then we each sleep separately." "All right then." Tamara Carter glanced at him. "Where am I staying?" "The best room, already prepared for Miss Carter." Lucas Sterling clasped his hands and stood beside her, just like a servant. "Miss Carter?" Tamara Carter snorted coldly. Why aren't I a little stiff corpse this time? You protected my manly pride. How can I not be grateful? How dare I disrespect you again? Wouldn't that make me ungrateful? Lucas Sterling smiled obsequiously beside her. Suddenly finding him so obedient, Tamara Carter felt a little unaccustomed. She yawned and went to bathe and rest on her own. Busy for half the night, she was utterly exhausted. Her head hit the pillow, and she quickly fell into a deep sleep. Perhaps feeling safe at Lucas Sterling's residence, she slept soundly, yet strangely, she dreamt. She dreamt of returning to Lorenzo Sky's White Cloud Pavilion. The weather was beautiful, sunny with a gentle breeze, and she and Lorenzo Sky strolled hand in hand through a flower garden. Lorenzo Sky gazed at her, his eyes gentle as rippling spring water, warm and tender. She felt like a flourishing spring plant, swaying cheerfully in the spring drizzle. This idyllic feeling left her deeply entangled even in her dream. She wanted to struggle awake, yet felt a certain reluctance. She swayed between sweetness and bewilderment in this peculiar state, like swinging on a swing, sometimes high, sometimes low, enjoying the slight weightlessness. Upon waking, she was met with brilliant sunlight. Lying in bed, slightly dazed, she heard a voice from outside, "Brother Lucas, are you awake?" Was it that arrogant girl in purple again? But hadn't she slept in the guest room? Why was this girl looking for Lucas Sterling here? While she was still in a daze, Sophie Taylor outside grew impatient and called out, "Why aren't you answering me?" "I don't care, I'm coming in." As she spoke, she pushed open the door and, upon seeing Tamara Carter's disheveled clothes, her eyes nearly bulged out of their sockets. Chapter 38, Why are you sleeping in Brother Lucas's bed? Sophie Taylor shrieked, grabbing a pillow and lunging at Tamara Carter. Unfortunately, with her strength, she couldn't even touch the corner of Tamara Carter's clothes. Frustrated and with nowhere to vent her anger, she plopped down on the floor, wailing loudly, You loose woman. You, seductress. You slept with my brother Lucas, boo-hoo, you slept with my brother Lucas." Tamara Carter's face was covered in black lines, cold sweat dripping down. Even if he bathed 100 times in flower petal water, wrapped himself in lilies, and lay on her bed, she wouldn't even glance at him. "Hey, you've got it all wrong." Tamara Carter patiently explained, "He wasn't here last night. He told me this was the guest room, so I stayed." Still making excuses. Sophie Taylor pouted, tears flowing even more freely. "You, an unmarried woman, stayed at the prince's residence overnight and slept in Brother Lucas's room. How dare you say nothing happened between the two of you? Your face is truly thicker than the city walls. It's not what you think." Tamara Carter's head pounded. "Last night, your brother Lucas suddenly had a relapse of his old illness and fainted by the roadside. I saw him and kindly brought him home. After taking care of him, it was already late, and it rained heavily last night. I had no choice but to stay." Before she could finish, Sophie Taylor wailed even louder, "Keep lying. Who said it rained heavily last night? It didn't rain at my house." Tamara Carter was surprised, but, really? Deceitful. Sophie Taylor abruptly sat up, her tear-reddened eyes glaring at her. "I hate women like you who always pretend to be virtuous. You said it rained last night. Let's go outside and ask around." "I don't believe it. Could it be that only the sky above your prince's residence and my house aren't under the same sky?" Without a word, she dragged Tamara Carter outside, yelling, "Everyone, tell me, did it rain last night or not?" The royal mansion servants averted their eyes, collectively feigning ignorance. Receiving no response, Sophie Taylor's fury intensified. Her spoiled temper flared, and she unleashed chaos upon the mansion with astonishing speed. Pots, jars, flowers, and plants were all casualties, the crashing sounds blending with her screams like a destructive tornado, leaving a trail of astonishing devastation. Tamara Carter was terrified. She had truly never encountered such a girl. Sophia Carter, despite also being a spoiled young lady with a terrible temper, was like Victoria Lennox, the type to feign decorum. Always mindful of her noble status, her every gesture exuded the elegant composure of a refined lady. Even her weeping was carefully controlled, lest any unsightly mucus escape. They wore their disguises like second skin. But this one before her was a creature of glass, her heart and lungs fragile and exposed. She sobbed uncontrollably, tears and snot streaming down her face, clearly in utter agony. Ignoring the cuts on her hands from the broken flower pots, she hiccuped, kicking and punching, repeating over and over, "It didn't rain last night. It didn't rain." Tamara Carter now understood. It hadn't rained last night. The dry, pale ground bore no resemblance to a scene of a night-long spring rain. Yet, outside Lucas Sterling's bedroom window, everything was drenched. This devil, his deceptive skills were truly disarming. However, Tamara Carter didn't understand why he would lie to make her stay. He constantly tried to conceal their involvement, even using his fourth brother as a shield. Wasn't it clear he didn't want others to discover their affair? Now, thanks to Sophie Taylor's outburst, rumors of their liaison would likely spread throughout the capital before midday. In the next room, separated by a wall, guard James Allen was asking his master a similar question. "My lord, what are you doing?" he asked, frowning and scratching his head. "Your subordinate doesn't understand. Why would you want to expose yourself?" Lucas Sterling rolled his eyes. "What exposure? It's not like Tamara Carter is the only woman who has stayed in my residence. But no one has dared to sleep in your bed." James Allen sighed. "My lord, have you noticed that since your entanglement with this woman, your condition has worsened?" Lucas Sterling rubbed his nose. "Well, my lord, this woman is a tigress. Can we please stay away from her?" James Allen persisted. "Actually, Miss Sue is very kind. She's crying heartbrokenly outside. Would you like to check on her?" Lucas Sterling was speechless. "James Allen, my lord, if you're not going out, you should hide first. I suspect that tigress is about to barge in." Just as he finished speaking, Tamara Carter's cold, clear roar echoed from the courtyard, "Lucas Sterling, get out here." Lucas Sterling shrank back, grimacing at James Allen. "Retreat." To find Lucas Sterling, Tamara Carter nearly turned the entire grounds of the royal mansion upside down. This ambivalent man, what does he mean? He clearly knows his younger sister, Yen, wakes him up every morning, lets her sleep in his bed, even creates fake rain to trick her. Is he complaining she hasn't been bothersome enough lately? Does he absolutely have to invite another rival to cling to his back? She brazenly overturned everything in front, while Sophie Taylor clung to her back, repeatedly asking, "Did you sleep with Lucas or not?" Tamara Carter was driven to the point of mental distress. Although she possessed exceptional martial arts skills, she couldn't lay a hand on Sophie Taylor, because this little girl had no martial arts skills whatsoever, and even more deadly, she was the daughter of the Minister of War. The Minister of War, Sun Yencheng, 40 years old this year, his character unknown, but one thing was certain, he and Edward Carter were at odds. He was Edward Carter's greatest political enemy in the court. Edward Carter's backing was the old Lord Cody Sterling, while Sun Yencheng's backing was his own father, the heterodox Marquis Yong, who once braved the battlefield for Alexander Sterling, conquering thousands of miles of territory. Ho Yong and Cody Sterling were considered the two pillars of the Longwell Kingdom, equal in power and prestige, but these two were also at odds, fighting from youth to old age. Now their descendants had emerged, occupying extremely important positions in the power structure of the Longwell Kingdom, and the habit of vying and fighting continued. Tamara Carter had skillfully gleaned this information during the fifth prince's birthday party. Rarely encountering a major figure who could push Edward Carter to his demise, no matter how arrogant she was, Tamara Carter didn't want to offend this figure's daughter. Now, only Lucas Sterling's appearance could control the damned girl clinging to her back. The servants of the Xiang royal mansion watched wide-eyed as the two madwomen wreaked havoc within the mansion, but not one dared to step forward and stop them. Their master had already gone into hiding, hadn't he? Tamara Carter rampaged through the royal mansion for half a day, tiring herself to the point of a dry throat. Sophie Taylor, running up breathlessly, looked at the scene of devastation behind her and suddenly realized she had done something foolish. Tamara Carter, you seductress, she stamped her foot and cursed, you not only slept with Lucas, but also destroyed his royal mansion, I won't let you off. She grabbed a stick and swung fiercely at Tamara Carter. Tamara Carter cried out in distress, seeing a rock garden ahead, she dove into it without hesitation. Once inside, she felt something was amiss. There seemed to be a secret within this rock garden. She followed a narrow staircase down, the path ahead pitch black without a single ray of light. After a short distance, she suddenly smelled a strange odor. Chapter 39. This smell, she seemed to have smelled it somewhere before, a smell of medicinal herbs mixed with floral fragrance. The next second, she suddenly thought of the tomb chamber Lucas Sterling had once taken her to. Not wanting to pry into someone else's secrets, she decided to turn back. However, at this very moment, a man's soft chuckle came from within the tomb chamber. Deep, yet with a hint of unrestrained arrogance. It was Lucas Sterling. So this was where he was hiding. She pushed open the stone door and stormed in without hesitation. A flash of purple robes vanished before her eyes, and she shouted, "Demon, where are you running?" At her call, the dark stone chamber suddenly became bright as day. Tamara Carter stared blankly at the scene before her. It was a room carved from white jade, clean and tidy, even the white jade coffin and the vase in the middle were identical. However, it wasn't the room she had been to before. Because the walls of this tomb chamber were covered with paintings. Paintings of women. All kinds of women, slender, plump, each with their own unique features. The women in the paintings were scantily clad, some only draped in a thin layer of gauze, covering vital parts, others completely naked, but regardless of their attire, these women all wore strange smiles. Or rather, lascivious smiles, leading Tamara Carter to suspect that these women were secretly painted after indulging in pleasure. Scoundrel, you're still a scoundrel. Tamara Carter stared at the paintings with an impassive face and shouted, "Lucas Sterling, you lecher. Get out here." Her voice echoed in the empty tomb chamber, but no one answered. Tamara Carter looked down, searching, but found nothing. It seemed the laughter she had just heard was merely her imagination. How strange. She shook her head and inadvertently glanced into the white jade coffin. Outside the white jade coffin hung a piece of purple robe, embroidered with exquisite silver flowers, extremely eye-catching. She pursed her lips, wanting to startle him, so she held her breath, tiptoed forward, and with lightning speed, flung open the coffin lid. The moment the coffin lid opened, her eyes widened in shock. Inside the white jade coffin lay a desiccated corpse. Of course, what made her eyes widen wasn't the corpse itself, but the skull of the corpse. The body had become a skeleton, but the skull remained intact, its eyebrows and facial features identical to Lucas Sterling's, its eyes closed as if in deep sleep. And the robe on the corpse looked eerily familiar. Deep purple, made of high-quality silk, luxurious and noble, the hem embroidered with exquisite silver flowers, it was the robe Lucas Sterling often wore. Although Tamara Carter was accustomed to seeing corpses and severed limbs, she had never seen such a combination of a skeleton and a living person's head. She felt a chill run down her spine, a fear like 100 centipedes slowly crawling across her back. Suppressing her fear, she reached out to touch the skull's nose. Cold and lifeless, utterly cold. She stumbled back a few steps in alarm. While she was terrified, she suddenly heard Sophie Taylor's voice, "Tamara Carter, even if you go to heaven or hell, I will drag you out." Tamara Carter stared blankly at the stone doorway, momentarily unsure whether to stay or leave. At that moment, Lucas Sterling's voice suddenly rang out. "You damned girl, where do you think you're going? He seemed to have just chased after her from above, pushing Sophie Taylor aside. Tamara Carter remained motionless. Lucas Sterling strode in, his voice icy. "What are you doing there?" Tamara Carter, speechless, pointed a trembling finger at the combined skeleton and asked, "What is this?" Lucas Sterling's eyes turned cold as he barked, "Who told you to open it? Even if you're not afraid of skeletons, you can't disturb the spirits of others." He strode forward to close the coffin lid. Tamara Carter, about to explain, glanced at the skeleton and her eyes widened again. This time, not only did her eyes widen, but her breath hitched, her entire body stiffening as if she had become a joncher. The skeleton, previously clad in a purple robe with a full skull, had transformed. The lifelike skull was gone, the purple robe vanished. Now, within the white jade coffin, lay an ordinary white skeleton. Two dark sockets in the skull stared silently at her, its mouth agape as if mocking her. Tamara Carter was utterly dumbfounded. This bizarre phenomenon defied even the most advanced scientific explanation. Swallowing hard, she looked at Lucas Sterling and asked, each word measured, "Are you human or ghost?" Lucas Sterling glanced at her and, extending his hand, pulled her outside. Beside the rock garden, by the azure lake, brilliant sunlight bathed her face. A gentle breeze carried the fragrant scent of flowers. Tamara Carter knew she had returned to the world of the living. Yet, the previous scene replayed incessantly before her eyes. "Are you, in the end, human or ghost?" she asked, her gaze fixed coldly on Lucas Sterling. "Is your brain waterlogged?" Lucas Sterling